za kusisimua, mziki wa kata viungo na kindumbwe cha siasa au politics ukipenda. We are streaming live on Facebook from Kilimanjaro Studios outside Washington, D.C. And we will shortly be going live on YouTube, so call all your YouTube friends. And please remember to subscribe to both our YouTube and Facebook pages at The One Mic Show and follow us on Instagram at One Mic Show. We'll also be taking live calls tonight at 202-683-4570 and press *5 to speak, so save that number. Now later tonight, we'll recap last week's interview with Swahili Village CEO Kevin Onyona. Want to hear from you on how you felt about his defense against wage theft allegations and if we treated him fairly. Feel free to start typing in the comment section below right now. Na bila kusahau, tapokea mziki toka DJ wetu machachari mleta habari DJ Omoshfire na tunadunda kule viwanjani na Mika Oti yake namba 7 mgongoni akituletea habari za michezo. Na moja kwa moja toka Kilimanjaro Studios ni mimi mtangazaji na mwanahabari wako mpendwa Ali Badawi. Kwetu wananiita mteule na wengine mniite mjukuu wa Masai. Because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Karibuni.
Now, let's talk politics.
Now this hour we'll be talking to political and cultural contributor Annette Karanja regarding the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict. We'll talk about how the Jewish state of Israel was to be established in Kenya. Then we'll also talk about the failed attempts to elect a speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives and how this might affect us. Now please start typing below and tell us where you are tuned in from and what you want to hear us say tonight. I'm your host and producer Ali Badawi. It's Friday the 20th of October and we are streaming live from Kilimanjaro Studios outside Washington, D.C. Now, please remember to subscribe to our One Mic Show YouTube channel and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And on panel with me tonight is Mr. One Mic Kamakawa. Sports anchor Mika Och will be joining us via Zoom. Our resident DJ Omoshfire is live on the decks. And also not forgetting our super producer, Mubelwa Bandio. And I want to take this opportunity to welcome our guests. I can see Akinyi Odo is already in the building. Karibu sana Akinyi. And everyone else who's joined in. I can see Ayuma is in there. I can see Ann is in there. Karibuni sana. Feel free to start commenting and telling us what you want us to talk about. Remember, later on in the show, we're going to be doing a recap of last week's interview. You know, what you thought, where we fell short, you know, where we did well. So you can start, you know, like typing up those comments right now. But we're going to go ahead and get started right away. And tonight we are privileged to host our U.S. politics culture contributor, Miss Annette Karanja. Now, Annette is a second-generation Kenyan who's raised in Baltimore, Maryland. She's a political activist who focuses on social justice and economic and political rights for immigrants. Now, earlier this year, Annette was appointed by Baltimore County Mayor Johnny O to the New American Task Force. She also just received a public service award from the Baltimore County local chapter of the Democratic Party, which she'll be telling us about. Now, Annette also has a passion on political mobilization and assisting Kenyans access government services. She's here today to talk about the conflict in Gaza and why it's important to us. She'll also be talking about how the state of Israel could have been in Kenya, and we're going to be having a discussion about that. So keep it locked to learn. And we're going to be talking about so many other things. And Annette, I want to welcome you back once again to Kilimanjaro Studios. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm fabulous. Thank you.
All right. Now that's good. Now before we go on today's topic, you know, last time when you were here, that was back in August, the first week of August, we spoke about misconceptions that Gen 1 Kenyans who came here as grown-ups have of Gen 2 who were born and raised here. You know, on that conversation that we had, that was, I think, like maybe like 2-3 months ago, what were maybe one or two big takeaways that you got from that conversation? Maybe something that you had not quite thought about, but you got from that conversation we had, Anne?
Well, I believe that when it comes to generational issues, there needs to be some sort of go-between that can help translate.
Okay.
Sometimes there are things that are just interpreted on both sides simply because we don't have context or the ability to kind of tease out what is really meant. And so it was a great opportunity to have a conversation and allow for me to see different perspectives beyond the one that I've experienced and the ones that I've heard, which is great. I love an opportunity to grow, and it's going to definitely help me when I'm connecting in intergenerational issues as I move forward.
Okay. Was there anything that you heard, you know, like from maybe your peers, your friends who listen to the show?
So my peers, a lot of the things that I said or some of the examples that I gave were examples that they connected with and relate to. And so for some of them, they told me it was nice to hear that being spoken in a platform like this, where maybe you might not have the conversation at the dinner table with your parents, but if it can be heard on a platform like this, it's definitely going to reach that generation in a way that's safe and comfortable for them. So that's what I heard.
Okay, good. And hopefully we're going to have a part 2 of that conversation. But now we want to move on to today's conversation. And we all know that Gaza has been under attack from Israel over the last week. Now, the state of Israel declared war following an attack by Palestinian militant group Hamas at a music festival that left more than 1,000 people dead. Now, estimates indicate that airstrikes from the Israeli Defense Forces have left more than 4,000 Palestinians dead. Annette, I want to come to you. And today, we're looking to understand, first of all, the background of this over 75-year-old conflict. And it's interesting that Kenya was once considered a possible site for the Jewish state of Israel. But first things first, let's start with basics, because we don't want to go back and regurgitate what has been over and over the news throughout the week. The Israelites, are the Israelites that we know today descendants of those that are referred to in the Holy Scriptures? We're talking about the Bible and the Quran. They're called Israelis today. In the Bible, in the Bible, they're called Israelites, and in the Quran, we call them Bani Israel, the people of Israel. So are these the descendants of those people, or who exactly are these people who are occupying that land today? Annette?
So I think that the first thing I want to say about that question is that we tend to think about Israel or the Jewish people as a monolithic group of people, when in actuality, they're very diverse and they range in different ethnicities. There is the religious portion of it, and then there's also the passing through the matriarch. There's also that part of it too, right? So when you have different layers like that, it can get a little bit confusing. In the United States, we have a lot of the Jewish population that is here looks a certain way. They are what?
And what's that certain way?
I think the politically correct term is white presenting or white appearing.
Okay.
And which can lead people to believe that that's how all Jewish people look. So when we're talking about going back to the Bible, there's a bit more diversity than what we see here in the United States. So to say that they are or they are not, yes, some of them are directly the same. However, there is a larger population which, because of the concept of wanting to create a Jewish state, which would allow any person who is considered a Jewish person to go back, this is the concept of Zionism, to go back to that Jewish state, then it's a diverse group of people. It's not just one ethnic group. It's anyone who identifies and qualifies in that sense. Okay.
Now, the reason why this is a bit confusing is because, like when you see Israelis, there's that tendency of them to look in a certain way.
Right.
For example, there's people who've been practicing Judaism for, quite a number of years, thousands of years in Ethiopia, for example.
Right.
We don't see people looking like that,
right,
as like so-called Israelis.
You mean black?
Yes, exactly. We don't see black people, because this was supposed to be a homeland where people who are practicing Judaism from whatever part of the world, what to go and reunite there. But then there's a tendency to only see European-looking people,
right?
Who are in Israel.
And that has a lot to do with how things are depicted, right?
Okay.
And so the part of it is media, but if we're talking about specifically using the Bible as a historical text, then we hear stories about Moses and people being in Egypt, right? And then there is this running away from Egypt. So when you're running away, where are you going? You're going deeper into Africa. And then that, for some reason, I think is lost on a lot of people, because what that means is that there was geographical population in Africa that were practicing Jews at that time. But that's not what we think about. We don't think about that. And I think another thing that is important to note too is how we understand and remember what happened in Germany. So when we're talking about the Holocaust, many people were affected, but the majority of people that may be portrayed in the media tend to be the white Jew, when in fact there were lots of blacks who were affected by Nazi Germany and also put in concentration camps. There were disabled individuals who were put in concentration camps. So the lack of representation of the diversity of those who were affected by the Holocaust is another reason why there is a tendency to lean towards the white appearing individual as being the prototype of a Jewish person, when that's not the reality.
Yeah, and when you talk of the Holocaust, we're already at the Second World War,
right,
which is in the 40s. And of course, we're going to get to that. You know, I want to welcome all the listeners. We have Annette Karanja in the studio. I also want to welcome the other panelists that I have with me tonight. I have Uno Mike. I also have DJ Mosh Fire. And we have Mika Och, who's on Zoom. And I want to welcome also the people who are joining us on Facebook. I can see Baba Hanya is in the building. Maura Muroki is in the building. Angie Decadence is in the building. I can also see Sleo Dwar, Luis Muya, Stephen JJ. And remember, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. Now, later on in the show, we're gonna be doing a recap of last week's interview with Kevin Onyona, CEO, Swahili Village, regarding the wage theft allegations. So start preparing your comments. You can start commenting right now if you have something to say about it. But then, you know, like just coming back to the studio, you know, before I get onto the panel, Annette, I first want to come to you. Where did the original idea of creating a Jewish homeland? Because I think a lot of people may not be aware that the state of Israel as we know it today was born in 1948. It did not exist before that. But where did this original idea of creating a Jewish homeland, which is popularly known as Zionism, where did this emanate from, and why was it conceived? You know, like when did it start?
Okay, that's kind of a tricky question, because the concept of having a Jewish homeland it goes back to biblical times.
Yes.
But when we talk about the more recent Israel that we see today, for the purpose of keeping things simple and not being in history class, I would put it like this. A lot of the countries that we know and we see today were made because of treaties, because of alliances, and that's how the maps were drawn. Okay. So basically, when the decision was, let's get back to this Israel. So Israel has always been a concept. If you are talking in terms of biblical times, as a people, and so they have a very long history as being a collective people and having their own state, which from time to time may have had some sort of ruler take over. So the idea is, how do we get back to that? How do we create an opportunity for the Jewish people to have like a safe haven land? And so this was then created by treaties. So now before we get to the treaties, you're talking about a safe haven land, and we've gone back before the Holocaust, which is in the Second World War. So when you're talking about a safe haven, are we talking about a safe haven because there was issues that they were facing in different parts of the world that they were, and this is before the Holocaust? Right. So the Jewish people have had many. I like going back to the biblical times because I know that probably if you didn't take a history class, you might recognize the stories that have been told and or have experienced this from the Jewish community. Yes. So we have, for example, if you live in Baltimore County, we have days off of school if you're in the public school system specifically for Jewish holidays. And many of those holidays are remembering, different events that occurred in their history, right? Remembering the being freed from Egypt, remembering, many of the times their lands were occupied and things of that nature, right? So there is a history over hundreds of years. So this isn't just, our recent history, there's a history over thousands of years of having to deal with being occupied or moving from land to land. So with Moses, they moved. With Abraham, they moved, for those who are familiar with those biblical references. So imagine that is your history for 2,000 years, and now your people are spread out. We've learned more recently when it comes to the world wars how anti-Semitism has been a big point when it comes to these world wars. But world wars always start with smaller conflicts. So when these smaller conflicts are happening and the Jewish people are being affected by that, and there is that consistent history, now there is this let's go back home concept, right? And so now we go back to the historical concept of where the Jews once lived. Now they lived in many places. We get to this Israel decision considering that the Jews once lived there. At least that's the thinking or the reason why that area was picked, although they had other options.
Okay, and when we're talking about other options, like let's talk about those other options. This was before, we're talking about where present-day Israel is in what was formerly called the land that was called Palestine, which was under the Ottoman Empire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So what other options were being considered?
So in East Africa, there's a portion of land that resides between Uganda and Kenya. So the current Uganda and Kenya, there's a section of land there that was being considered to be Israel, to be the homeland. And I would love to hear your thoughts on why you think that didn't happen, because there's the official reasons, but there are other. I mean, we can speculate.
People didn't look the same.
Savages.
Okay.
Wow, Mika, welcome to the show.
So my thinking is, remember that time the world was the British were colonizing very big parts of the world, and they were busy, signing treaties without talking to the locals, without consulting them, without without any kind of due process. And I think the reason why, remember, East Africa, Kenya especially, was a settler colony. And this is a very interesting aspect that a lot of people don't know the different kinds of colonialisms that were there in Africa. You notice that in a country like when you see the differences in Kenya, for example, in Tanzania, we were right next to each other, and we were both British colonies. But Kenya was a settler colony, meaning the British had come to settle in Kenya. They brought people to settle in Kenya, and their plan was to live there forever.
Right.
Yes. So the other settler colonies in Africa, Zimbabwe. Another settler colony in Africa, South Africa. And those are countries that still have South Africa still has a huge presence of white people. Zimbabwe has some remnants of white people. I think after the land conflicts in the 90s, a lot of them left. But the plan was to come and settle forever. Like the way white people came to the Americas, and they've settled
and
here. Australia. And they settled here forever.
Right.
So that was the
Forever?
plan.
I think there's a TZ guy who has cut feelings, but I don't know.
So the difference between settler colony and like the colonization that was in Tanzania they would send district commissioners, they would send officials, but they would not take families to live there. And that's where you see
uninhabitable,
and that's where you see there's an influence. There's a bigger colonial influence that Kenya has, because when you think about it, the colonial project in Kenya was less than 70 years. It wasn't a very long time.
No, it wasn't.
But the impact was so big.
Yeah.
So with bringing the Jewish state to East Africa, that would have been a second colonialism. Because remember, a country that has suffered two colonialisms is South Africa. South Africa was under the British, and then there was the Boer War.
The Boer Wars.
No, the Boer War, then the British left, and they left the Boers, and the Boers implemented this system that's called apartheid. which are not according to me, according to Nelson Mandela. He says that, like what currently Israel, or at that time when he was alive, what Israel was practicing in that zone was akin to apartheid. So
It's him and many other scholars.
yes, and many other
So you're
scholars.
saying
experts.
Mandela and Arafat were in the same WhatsApp group?
Yes, Mandela and Arafat were in the same WhatsApp group. In
Okay.
fact, Mandela would say we are not fully free until, like Palestine is free. And I'm glad this is happening right now because it's forcing people to read history. One area that I would say is lacking in our institutions of education, like from elementary school, middle school, high school to universities, is history. There's a historical illiteracy that is very rampant, where, like something as basic as knowing that Israel was created in 1948. A lot of people don't know. Mika.
Even the
But then,
backstory
Ali,
to that.
Ali,
Sorry, go
the
ahead.
thing is, we cannot really blame it because even if we look at our own local history in Kenya, our own local history in Kenya actually does teach us in glorifying the home guards who worked with
With the British.
more with the British, yes.
Yeah.
And then the history that they teach us, they only teach us about one group of people who fought for independence and claim they fought for the whole country while people fighting for the whole land. All in all, history is, or rather education is controlled by the person who's in power, and the curriculum and how they want to write it, they will write it we don't tell our own African stories they want them to tell them.
Well, that
Now,
was
if
true.
you look at the story of Israel, the state, this one which has been created right now, and as you rightly say, they were looking at a point: where are we going to settle all these people who are coming from Auschwitz? Where are we going to relocate them? Where are we going to move them? We need to take somewhere. And Kenya was considered as part of it, but then at that particular moment, that was part of where there was a lot of resistance from the locals, and the locals were not getting into it. So bringing another bunch of people to settle in, it meant that there was land which was supposed to be created. That land meant that locals had to go. At that particular time, they were having a lot of resistance from both, and the region they were considering, from both the Mumias, what is the name of this other guy? The Kalenjin, the Koitalel, from Nabongo, Koitalel, and even part of the Baganda kingdoms who were fighting the settlers at that particular moment. So they had to rethink it. And where did they go to? They went to. It actually was so good that there was a book already that was written and was saying that these people belong to a certain area. This is their land that they were given by God. And so it was easy for them to go and settle in Palestine at that particular moment, which was a British colony. And what is the best way of making that history continue? It's already in the Bible, as Annette said, a book that is more than 2,000 years old. It was already in the Bible. So it was easy to just continue the narrative that this was Israel. And we took people from Auschwitz and brought them back home where they belong, which is Israel. Because a lot of people have actually thought that it's the Palestinians who are settlers in that area. They're the people who are brought in. Most people assume that Israel was there. It was the home for the Jews as they're called now the Israelis. It was home for the Israelis. And the Palestinians were the people who were from the neighboring Arab nations, are the ones who came in. And who because they were moved to settlements at that time by the British to allow the Jews who were coming from different areas now called the Israelites to be moved in there. So it was very easy to push that narrative continuing from the Bible. So we can say, okay, we can blame that what the history that is being taught, but the history that is being taught was written by who? Most of Kenyan's curriculum was written by who?
Yeah.
So my only thing with
now we have a comment here that's coming from Kenyan Jui. Kenyan Jui is back in the building, and I also see Brenda BK. Brenda, karibu sana. Kenyan Jui says, the moment she starts framing these conversations by stating, let us go back to biblical times as a point of reference, she clearly gives off the perception that this is being set up to be bidding for the Israeli argument of entitlement. This is there is there's document history of how existing occupants of the land, that's the Palestinians, were driven out of their land, not biblical time. I'm talking about living memory. Forget the fictional narrative of the Bible. You can go on the YouTube and watch the videos of Palestinians being kicked out of their homes. Now that's Kenyan Jewish comment, and that's how he feels. Annette, back to you.
What I would say about the way that history is taught, while it is true that it's taught a certain way, we are in a point in time where you can Google certain things. You can actually look up these histories. And my thing, regardless of what I'm talking about, is to never get so nitty-gritty into the technical terminologies and the dates. I want to create a point of reference that can be familiar, and that was the point of my comment. Is just to give us a landing point, and also to help people understand how other people are thinking when we're having this discussion, because it's very important to understand that. So if you are on one side and you have no understanding of the other side, then it's very difficult for there to be progress in that conversation. As far as you know, if we're taking sides, that wasn't really the point of my comment. It was just to talk about how did we come to this concept of Israel as a nation, and then the Zionism that has been birthed from that, and this culture of people going back to a homeland, and if you have a birthright to go back there. So currently, if you are a Jewish person, then you can go to Israel, and there shouldn't be an issue for you. And if you should want to resettle there, it should be very easy for you. Like, these are things that were established based on this concept of Zionism.
Does that include, you know, like black? One second, Mika. No, 1 second. I'll give you a chance, Mika. Does that include, you know, like black Jewish people? Or?
So my experience with those who speak specifically on diversity within the Jewish community, especially the black population that's here in the United States. One of the things that they discuss is that it is true that there is discrimination against them. One, because there is an assumption that you are not Jewish because you don't present, like I said, the examples that I gave, right? So how things are depicted in the media. It's not just the Jews who we think look one way. Even when you think about an Arab person, or if you think about a Muslim person, what image comes to mind? When the reality is Muslims are very diverse and they look very many different ways, right? But that doesn't mean that that's how the world considers it. Media has a big impact on what the general population believes a certain group is like, and that propaganda has an effect then on how we behave towards them, and even in situations like this.
Okay, Mika, you had something that you wanted to add.
Yeah, and I think what I wanted to say that now the thing is, and the reason why the Zionism which has been created right now is actually one of the most fought things, especially in that reason, is because number one, you are allowing other people who are not from that region to go back and claim that this is their home, while moving away people who are from that region to create space for these new people. And number two, let's not forget that in that region, there were Jews already who are of Arab descent, and a lot of them, and they also face discrimination. And that's the issue, that most of that why they're fighting even that Zionism, the Zionism that it is right now, is that it's not an inclusivity of all Jews. It's like there's a bunch of, or it's like there's a picking or a nitpicking of it. When it comes to Israel as what it was written on the papers and Israel as what it is right now, they're two different things.
Okay. So there's a concept of,
and it has nothing to do with religion.
So
just to say that there's nothing to do with Judaism or Islam or being or Islam. What is happening right now is basically Israeli versus Palestine versus other people. So they try to hide it behind religion, but it has nothing to do with religion.
Okay.
Because there are Jews who actually are discriminated in that region, and there are Jews who actually don't believe that what Israel is doing is supposed to be done the way it is.
So there's this concept called Zionism, which is I believe the concept of people, of the Jewish faith, like going back to a particular homeland, and I think from my reading it says it was birthed around the 1890s, the 1880s.
Rothschild.
And then it went through this process because at that time Palestine was still under Ottoman rule. It was still under Turkish Ottoman rule. Then the First World War happened. Now, the interesting thing that in the First World War, now that I've been learning, is that the British were very good at, like at that time, they were very good at being deceptive and setting people against each other. It's a thing that they did in Africa, and it's the same thing that they went and did
Divide and rule
in the Middle East.
Divide and rule, yeah.
Yes. So at that time, the Ottoman Empire, that's actually the last. For those who don't know, that was the last Muslim caliphate, because it came to an end after the end of the First World War. So the Ottoman Empire was kind of, and at that time the caliphate was kind of like a place where the ruler of the Islamic world was. So at the time, the British went and set the Turks and the Arabs against each other. At the time, the Sharif of Makkah, because the caliphate had moved from the Arabs and it went to the Turks. So they promised the Caliph of Makkah that we're going to give you the caliphate back. And then they went and promised something different to the Turks. So they made them, they convinced the Arabs to go fight against the Turks. And that's how everything, came falling apart. And then there was something called the Balfour Declaration, which was the first document that was established, I think, in 1917 to kind of set the ball rolling for a Jewish state. So there's a lot of details in this.
So many details.
Yes.
So many conversations, so many treaties, so many people involved who are not necessarily the people that we're talking about. And we can see that reflected today, because now what we have is a global conversation that's going on, and there are alliances, right? So the United States has its alliances, and then we have, Jordan, and then we have Saudi Arabia, and then we have Egypt, and there are a lot of countries that are involved. And so I think it's important, first and foremost, for me, whenever I'm having a conversation on this topic, to understand that there are a lot of decision makers who are involved, but unfortunately, the biggest impact now are going to be the people, right? So currently in Gaza, we have individuals who are not Hamas. Hamas is not the entire, not all of Gaza, right?
Yes.
The majority of people there are not political leaders. They are not part of Hamas. And we know this because about 53% of the population in Gaza are children. So they can't be political leaders. And if that is the case, then that means that, the majority of people who are being affected, and this is always the case, are going to be the people who are not the leadership who's making the decisions, right? They didn't have a referendum and decide this is how we're going to attack, when we're going to attack, and so on and so forth. Same thing in Israel. There are individuals who are making decisions. And with this last attack that occurred, the prime minister is losing popularity, because there was this big part of his, and I don't want to say his name wrong, there's this big part of his campaign about peace in Israel and about how he's going to create order. And so when this happened, that really took a blow to all of his political statements and promises that he's made to the people who are there. And I think it is important for us to create safe environments if that's your job to do so, So there are a lot of factors. I think it's important to understand that when we're talking about the politics of it, that doesn't mean we're talking about the people.
But now, when we look at the reality of what's happening, and the narrative, for a very long time, there had been one specific narrative, there are these guys on one side who are considered, terrorists, and then there are these other guys on another side who are considered to be defending themselves. And and from my own observation of the media landscape, in the last couple of days that this has been happening, that narrative that I think America once had and Israel once had in their favor has really shifted. Almost, maybe you can talk to us and maybe just tell us what your perception has been of what's been happening. In as far as from when that Hamas attack happened to when Israel, like decided to, pretty much, like carpet bomb, like parts of Gaza?
I guess it came as a shock, or should I say surprise, or everybody was like, huh, this happened and nobody saw it coming, Israel is supposed to have the best intelligence, Mossad, blah blah blah, yada yada yada, right? So indeed it has happened, and then the narrative is, okay, it's Hamas. Hamas is linked to a terror group or to terrorists. And so basically, things shift a different way. And like Annette has said, in all of this, the civilians, the children, the women, and the non-combatants are the ones who suffer on either side. Now, of course, with the history of everything going back, all the way back, everybody tends to forget that it's Palestine who are basically occupied, and it's because pretty much Israel has dwarfed Palestine with all of this. And if you look at the map of how, when initially they came in 48, and then you go fast forward to about, say, 60 something, and you look at the density of the population, it keeps increasing, which means that the footprint is continuing, to go in and occupy to the point where it's saturated that land. It's almost like when you're looking at an X-ray of somebody who has fluid in their lungs, and you see all the white, and you don't see any, it's occupied with, and so basically that's what's happening there. Now, back in the day when we were hearing initially of Israel, there was the PLO, and Yasser Arafat. And, and he was the guy who basically nobody wanted to deal with. He was the worst guy ever. And funnily enough, he ended up, coming in. I think, didn't he win a Nobel Peace Prize, or am I crazy?
Yeah, there's a Nobel Prize, I believe he won. And I think during his leadership is when we came closest to what's typically referred to as a two-state solution, whereby a line is drawn and Palestinians are given their own state, and then the Israelis are given their own state.
Correct. Yeah. And that's because they were pushing.
Yes.
They were pushing, and, and these guys, they had pretty much gone to the brink of, I guess I'd say death, where it's basically like, okay, we have gotten to where we have gotten to, and from here now, the only thing is either we kill each other outright or we come to some sort of terms. Now, the guys who are the people who are doing this now, in my opinion, looking on from the outside, if you compare with the PLO days and the way PLO guys were coming in and doing their thing, these guys don't care.
Now,
they really don't care. And the reason why I'm saying they don't care is when you look at the gravity of what's happening on the ground, the sophistication of the weapons that are being used, and then on top of that, these guys are like, again, looking at history, we were occupied. You have taken what's ours. We don't care. The only solution for us is you get out, period. We don't even want to negotiate. It's almost like that's basically where they have gotten to.
I think that's where they've gotten to, and there was one comparison that was made by someone I was listening to. He was like, well, what really happened in that land is equivalent of take a state like New York and say, Muslims are like 5% of New York. But they get there and decide that they want to get a certain portion of New York. They kick people out of their houses and occupy their houses, and then later on say, you know what, let's have a deal whereby we can take 50% and then we're going to leave for the rest of you 50%. And I think that's part of the reason why the Palestinians, for the most part, most Palestinian leaders and most Palestinian regimes have rejected, those two-state solutions.
Which is very understandable, because just like you say, if you're using the New York state, let's say you say these guys were given Long Island, and they started, rolling down, saying, okay, I'm taking Staten Island, I'm still coming in, and then I'm hitting Manhattan, and then we're just gonna give you like a small slither. Maybe we'll give you Bronx.
Yeah.
You cooler Bronx, the rest is ours. And it's sad that everybody has forgotten that that's where we have come from. I don't know what the right solution is. I think the right solution is stop the fighting. Then let's try to figure out what is the best way out. Are we at the point where we say, okay, you guys withdraw, and withdraw up to what point? Where do you say, where is that line? Like you're saying, that two-state, where is the line? Where would the line be? Would it be like 70-30? Would it be 50-50? Would it be on which side? Like, would Palestinians get more? Would Israelis get less? Where is it that you draw in this line? And these demarcations were things that folks sat down at a meeting and decided.
Yes, and before Uno comes in, there's something that has been happening across the world, in the Muslim world. And here I'm going to talk, as a Muslim, and what's been happening within the Muslim world. There's a disconnect between Muslim leaders, or leaders of, let me not say Muslim leaders, let me say leaders of Muslim countries. For example, Mohammed bin Salman, who was trying to go do something called normalization with the Israelis. Right now he's paused, and the reason why he's paused is because of what's happening in the Muslim world right now. With all the divisions that we have, for the first time across the world, in America, in Kenya, in the Middle East, everyone, and I can tell you it's almost all mosques across the world. This is what they're talking about. Even there's the standard prayers that we typically have, and then there's a special prayer called a kunut that's usually read when there's something special happening in the world or something that we all want to pray for. So the whole Muslim world. So what's happening right now is that the leaders in a lot of these Muslim countries who've been cutting deals with Western leaders are not exactly sure, what to do, because this is becoming an existential problem whereby people are saying, you show us what your direction is on this Palestinian issue, and we will show you if we want you to stay in power or not. And the other thing that's also happening in America, because we're also going to talk about party politics. For the very first time, since 9/11, Muslims have been Democrats, because those, Republicans wanted us, to be off this planet.
Right.
So the Democrats were able to ride on that. I'll tell you something right
2016,
now.
but
I am a card-carrying Democrat, but I have to tell the Democratic Party to be very careful. And I know, Annette, you're a Democratic Party activist. You have to be very careful when you're dealing with Muslim communities. There's two issues you do not want to touch when you're approaching Muslim communities for votes or if you're looking for places where you can ally on certain things. Two things. Number one, this Palestinian issue. Don't touch it. If you're not pro-Palestinian and you're dealing with Muslim communities here in America, just don't touch it. Don't talk about it. Talk about something else. Talk about, better schools, better roads. Talk about something else. Second thing, you don't want to touch LGBTQ. Those two things are going to be very existential to Muslims. I'm not so concerned about Muslims crossing over to the Republican Party. I'm concerned about Muslims sitting out because they feel that this party no longer represents our interests, and they're telling us to go against what the Quran is telling us. So that was just a sidebar. That was just a quick sidebar.
So you're basically saying that it would then affect their voting base, and not having these guys is in essence rolling the dice to the other side.
Absolutely. And there's two states I'm concerned about.
I think Annette is going to take it back to the people she knows.
There are two states I'm concerned about that are toss-up states. Michigan and Minnesota is not quite toss-up, but Michigan is one of those places where things can go either way. And Michigan, I think, has 16 electoral college votes. And with the narrow margins that we saw in the last election, where you're seeing, maybe Biden winning by only 10,000 votes, a very small portion of the electorate can tilt So that's just one thing that that I can say that's happening within the
What's the
Muslim
second
world,
state?
at least here in America.
What's the second state?
Where people, the second state is Minnesota.
Or our people. Habesha.
Michigan and Minnesota, because those are
Not Habesha.
Somalis.
Somalia.
Because those are the two states. Those are the two states. Those are the two states with massive Muslim populations. So that's something that I think Democrats have to work very. And I'm saying this as a card-carrying Democrat, but they have to be very careful.
But let me ask you something. Do you think it's just the Muslim vote that Democrats are going to lose? Because I will honestly tell you how the Democrats are responding to how the Democrats have, let's say, number one, the war in Ukraine. Number two, this situation that's happening right now in Israel. That old man ain't helping himself with him trying to play both sides. He can just take the side he wants to take and support Israel, and then consequently we decide what we're going to do. But I know that for once I'm not voting presidential this year, just because I cannot vote for a Republican.
But Mika, you don't think that he's done something unlike all the other presidents where he's gone humanitarian, even though he has stood
it doesn't
by.
matter. You don't give Israel $4 billion for weapons, and then you give Palestinians $100 million for aid.
Yeah. So I think this is something that.
But then, isn't the $4 billion not in his control?
Why can't Israel fight itself? Why can't Israel fight for itself? Why do we need to fund Israel?
So like Mika is saying, I can only speak for the Muslim community because I am seeing, like what's happening, like within the community across the board. And this is across the board, like because there's forums where we meet where we're talking to Muslims from Dallas, we're talking to Muslims from Arizona and different places. And people right now are speaking with one voice. Right now, the stage at which American Muslims have got is where, like the leaders, the community leaders, or the ulamas, the scholars, are American-born people. They're not people who are born in Pakistan. They're not people who are born in Yemen. They're not people who are born in other parts of the world. They're mostly American-born people. We're talking about the Yasir Qadhis. We have people like Omar Suleiman. These are young people, and they're speaking the American language. So they're resonating a lot, especially with the younger kids, because before, like most of the leaders were people who immigrated here. But now we have this cohort of people, of scholars who are homegrown here in America. Some of them maybe
first generation, second
countries.
generation.
Yeah, like who are American, they're
Annette.
speaking American, and now like the younger Muslims are understanding their language. And I think this is something that people have not quite paid
a lot of attention to.
Yeah, and it's something that's happening. So I think it's something that and then the other interesting thing is that even other younger people, there were protests today in DC. There were pro-Palestinian protests in DC. At the National Mall, they had the Juma prayer there, the Friday prayer there, and Omar Suleiman was leading it at the National Mall where they swear in the president. And how I know...
was this a one-time thing with this prayer?
It's a one-time thing.
The one that they did on this one.
No. It was the standard Friday prayer.
Correct, but it's being
conducted at the National Mall.
Wow.
And the pictures I've seen, there were so many people there. And how I know this is resonating with so many people, people who are typically are political. Like my mother was currently in the country. She was in DC. She was telling me, like take the day off. My sister,
your mom had told you to go for million Muslim march.
Yes, my younger sister who's in Loyola University.
Yes.
College, also someone who's very apolitical. She was there.
She came from school.
Yes, and she was telling me,
"Wow,
you need to be here." Now, when I start seeing people who are apolitical, there are those of us who are in the grains of politics every day. And it's understandable, like when we bring up these issues. But now you're seeing people who are political, like people are texting me from from Kenya. People are texting me from other places. They're like, is this Muslims praying, like the Juma prayer? That's where the insurrection happened. The January 6th insurrection happened. And that's where, I'm still yet to review all the I don't know how many people were there, but there was a very big number of people. And there was also a very big number of people who are not necessarily Muslim who also showed up in support.
Right.
I think it's important to take a look at what young people are doing, because a lot of revolutions, a lot of changes, a lot of thought shifts within cultures have started on the college campus. That's the age. Those are the revolutionaries, really.
Yeah.
One thing that I've found that's interesting that's happening right now, Harvard University just lost a big donor because of students who were doing that same thing, gathering and showing their support of
a lot of universities, not only Harvard.
So,
A lot of
universities
are
have
having
lost.
that issue
So-
right now.
yes.
They're
so
trying to force
that-
students to, like, they don't want students to be protesting on their grounds, and which is very hard to stop them.
So-
right, because there's I'm not sure exactly how you would do that, and some of the letters that I have seen that have been written to university presidents goes along the lines of, there are gatherings happening for both sides, but one is being told that you shouldn't gather and the other one isn't.
So which one is being told not to gather?
The pro-Palestinian
Yes.
gatherings,
Or I will withdraw my donations. And by the way, this building is named after my family. We've been giving money to you guys for the last 40 years or 50 years or 60 years. We're going to stop funding you.
right?
And
so,
that-
And
those
I
are
think,
funds
and
are
I
pulling.
think this is what's actually making now a lot of people becoming aware of this, and a lot of people actually now looking into it and actually seeing that the atrocities that Israel are doing, because even in sports, there are Muslim players who put in statements in support of Palestine, and they were suspended by their teams. But we can see what's happening in Europe. There are that huge protest when Macron went and ran in support of Palestine, and the next day the whole of Paris was upside down with people pro-Palestinian Palestinian protesters. In Germany, we're seeing pro-Palestinian protesters being arrested, while pro-Israeli protesters are not being arrested. So this is actually bringing more eyes into how the world is looking at it. And there's that question of, why are you using force and might and money to protect somebody who's actually doing atrocities to those who are not doing it? And as you've said, unfortunately or fortunately, here is where we have an election. And as much as I see that it's going to be a turnoff to a lot of a turnoff to a lot of the Muslim electors, young people right now are seeing the country ruining education. The country doesn't have enough money for healthcare. The healthcare system is going down. They're feeling like everything, inflation is going high, but we have enough money to support wars that don't help us in any way. And unfortunately, the party that is in power is the one which is being seen as the one that's writing those checks. And yeah, Democrats will have it hard.
I think, to also provide context to the discussion, I think it's, for me, what happened with whatever was going on. I just decided to because you would hear about the Golan Heights, 1948. Then I started looking and searching for documentaries on YouTube, and I just happened to get one that I just shared, and something called Al Nakba.
Al Nakba, yeah.
I was like, what is this?
That was the original eviction of Palestinian people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's a history as to how, where this conflict up to where it is right now is
Documented
on
video.
and not documented on video, and there's paperwork, there's paper trail, and the participation of the British and what they did to facilitate the formation of the
Israel.
current Israel, how Palestinians or the persons who had found there before, who had been there before, what was done to get rid of them, to a point where, you know, a certain wing of a certain army that was funded by the British went out and they did bombings and they did whatever they did, funded by the British. So it's important, I think, for people to like Mika was saying, like really understand history, get to know the history behind the conflict, even before we even get to Shimon Peres and PLO.
Yeah.
I know, and I've mentioned this before, at one point in time Hamas and Israel worked together to undermine the PLO.
Yes, actually,
And that is documented.
Hamas,
it's
it
fact.
actually said that
That is
Hamas
a fact.
was a creation of Israel, created Hamas.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that is, we're not, it's not at Isijui, Kiwanon. No, it's there.
But it's history.
It's
repeating
history.
itself.
It's-
These-
yeah, so
these,
it's-
these things happen. You create these guys, and they're the ones who turn around and flip on you.
And the good thing, I think, Ali, I think we had been discussing about this of Nyuma tent, and we're like, there's an awakening that's going on. It's not just like I think Kanyanji was saying, it's not just that's the regular Kool-Aid that we've been being fed.
No.
People are seeing. People are, and I wish my niece was here, but she had to go. She had to bounce, and there's also that movement in University of Maryland. Students are saying, "Yo, we do not. We want you guys." I'm paraphrasing. We want you guys to understand that in this conflict, the Palestinians too are being fulumiwad, and you have to recognize that fact. And we're not liking the way that the way you guys are just standing with one side and not standing. And I'm like, she's 19, and she is. I wish she would have said something, but she had to bounce. But it's like you said, it's permeating. It is an upswell.
Because you see that we are living in an interesting time where the gatekeepers of information are gone. All these people who are blocking these documents and making sure that nobody knows, nobody can have access to them, or it will be very difficult to come across them. Those things, the World Wide Web, and all these new platforms you have, or all these alternative platforms you have, like Al Jazeera, TRT, all these are gone. And now people are saying there's a famous historian, in Mombasa called Stambuli. He says, zile siku za kusema ati hichi kilitokea kwa sababu niliambiwa na babu yangu zimeenda. Siku hizi ni unatoa ithibati. Show the evidence. Show us the evidence, and the evidence, they are everywhere. It's all hidden everywhere in plain sight. We are talking documents, we are talking videos, we are talking people, like who actually lived that time. Right here in America, you have people, I saw in some mosque in Texas, where people who lived through that first Nakba, people who are like 10 years old at the time, we have those people who are alive today in Texas. Annette.
I think it's there's something very interesting about where we are located geographically if you're here in the United States, because it's very easy to be removed from the things that are going on abroad because you don't physically see it happening, and that's what's different now, right? So we are physically seeing the videos. Everything that you're saying, I agree, there is an access of information. But the average American has not experienced wartime. The average American who is not in military has not been into a war-torn country or has not experienced what it's like to be in an area that experiences bombs frequently, things of that nature. So the only way you can get a concept of what the word war really means, which is a word that is used very liberally in this country, even when we're talking about something that is an inanimate object, the word war is used so much. But now we're talking about it and we have images and an understanding of what it means. But it's not just the reporting and the journalists. It's the fact that there are individuals who are streaming on YouTube, on Facebook, while the attacks
Live,
are happening.
yes.
in their homes, in their apartments, in their neighborhoods, or showing the destruction that happened the night before. And that's something that is very shocking, especially if you've never experienced being in a war. In war. So there are individuals who are here in the United States who maybe have come from a place where they experienced that. Their concept of when someone says bombs are going off is going to be very different than the person who's only spent their time here in the continental U.S. and has never experienced that. So I do know that there's a reckoning, an awakening that's going on, and there's empathy in a way that I haven't seen in a while with this. And that to me is very encouraging, because it's very difficult prior to this to have a conversation with someone and make them care if they don't see the current ramifications, right? So if we take this to our current politics and what's going on now, if there is an upset about how money is being spent, one, you need to understand the history of the treaties and the alliances that exist. And two, you also need to understand who is currently in power and can make votes and decide where money goes. And if you do not know who those people are and how they are voting, then you also have a responsibility, if you are an individual who can vote, to contact that person, to vote the next elections, to say that this is going to be a key concern for you when the election comes up. And I know that politicians are starting to see that and realize that, because remember when this first happened, there was a lot of pro-Israel conversation that completely lacked out the Palestinian side.
Yes.
As the days progressed, and not just politicians, even people who are social media personalities who have big followings have made these statements and then had to take some steps back later on and say, hey, we understand that lives are being lost everywhere, right? So this is not just crying for one side. We need to understand that people are dying in Gaza right now, and the majority of people who are losing their lives are in Gaza right now. And that's just numbers, right? Then these are the numbers that the U.S. government and the governments that do that type of thing, do those type of statistics, are providing us. So it's not Annette's personal bias about how many people are dying in Israel versus how many people are dying on the Palestinian side in Gaza. Those are just facts that are out there. And so I do appreciate the empathy that's there. I do appreciate the fact that someone has to now think twice about the situation and do the research. The same way when Mike went and found these YouTube videos, these documentaries, other people are doing that.
Correct.
And for me, who's a big advocate on educating yourself and knowing the tools that you have in front of you that you use all the time for your entertainment can also be used for your education, seeing that happening is very encouraging to me. And I want us to keep that same energy when it comes to the people who are making decisions. We need to know what our local politicians are saying about this. What are our state politicians and our Congress and the president? And that's something that can be a big factor when it comes to voting in the primary that's coming up, and then also in November.
Okay, and we're gonna get to elections 2024, and Uno Mike is gonna be reading the comments in a short while. So go ahead, Uno Mike.
I think our Sheke says Yasser Arafat won a Nobel Peace Prize jointly with Shimon Peres and Yitzhak Rabin for the Oslo Peace Accords.
Yes.
Kenyanjui says, pro-YouTube days, pre-internet, we could have drunk the Kool-Aid that the Israelis are the victims. But in this day and age, where you can consume facts directly by watching videos yourself without editorializing. That one.
Editorialization.
Yes, that one. You don't have to accept alternative facts. This is plain and simple ethnic cleansing. A lot of people may sit out. That's, I think, pertaining to voting.
Yeah.
Voting.
That's what Slay was saying. Mika is right. Giving weapons to Israel on the same breath expressing concerns for the Palestinians is equivalent to giving my rapists a condom.
Wow.
Mika naambiwa kanyangia waya wife. Let's see. God, this thing.
That comment.
Huyo wife sijui ametoka wapi.
Yeah, wife tena.
Yo
sijui
wife.
nini.
Yeah.
Wife anakanyaga huku.
You're frozen.
Yo, ulize Mika unakanyaga wife.
So I'll make it spitting
Yeah.
facts. So
Straight
Lawrence
from your mouth to God.
Was
Yeah.
that the same person who talked about the condom?
Kajanju says Israel is simply having a tough time adjusting to democratization of the truth, where we know all, where we know all, we now have all access to the truth. Just like the cops are now struggling that they have body cams and folks with phones around them. They can give the same BS narrative. They are fed us. They can or they cannot.
They
But
can't.
yeah. It's not about Israelis having a space in the Middle East. It's about what they're doing after. I'm guessing with what Lawrence is saying is pertaining to, yes, there's an agreement to this space,
Yeah.
but it's what they're doing after, meaning they were given the space and then they decide to expand like a what?
Yes.
Like a
They-
bacteria,
they-
virus.
They moved the fence.
It's
Kama ile
the
ya
same
Oshago.
example. 5% Muslims, 5% of New York mmekaribishwa, mmeingia Long Island, and then some mnasema mnataka Staten Island, mnataka Brooklyn,
Na
mnataka
muendelee.
Bronx.
You keep
and,
coming.
and you actually kick out people of their homes.
Yes.
Because that's what was happening actually during the Nakba.
Yes,
You
that's
know, like
exactly
people
what
are
I
being
mean. If,
evicted.
that thing
Yeah.
is kind of moving, because when you have the documented stories are being told.
Yeah.
At one point in time, like the person who was doing the documentary went in and she found plenty of footage on the Israelis and the Jews, what was going on, but very suspect the lack of footage pertaining to Palestinians. Like when you're trying to give a story, but you couldn't really find a lot.
Yes.
And again, that's cleansing of some sorts.
All right. I want to remind the listeners that you're tuned into the One Mic Show, and I'm your co-host and producer, Ali Badawi. Our guest host tonight is our U.S. political and cultural contributor, Miss Annette Karanja. Now, Annette is a political activist with the Democratic Party, and she recently received a public service award in her local Baltimore chapter. She's going to be talking about that. Now, she's here tonight to talk about the conflict in Gaza and how it may impact the world and the 2024 U.S. elections. Now, we'll shortly also be talking about how this conflict may affect President Biden's chances in 2024. So, I want you to stay tuned for that. And we're going to be opening up the phone lines shortly.
They are open, by the way.
Yeah, the number to call is 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. If you want to say something, Kenyan Jui, like if you have something to say, please feel free to
Piga
call that
simu
number.
Kenyan Jui.
Kenyan Jew is a typer.
Yeah, now
Is that type?
Yeah.
now
Now
before
imagine if they were voice notes.
Oh, Jews.
before we continue, Annette, there's a major event that will be taking place on Saturday the 28th at the Elimu Community Center in Baltimore. Please tell us about this.
Okay, so Elimu Community Center is having an official launch for their nonprofit and a fundraiser for said nonprofit. And I'm very excited about it because it's an opportunity not only for Kenyans to come and gather in the greater community, but we're also going to be connecting with our business people. Those of us who have businesses as Kenyans know that at Elimu, we've had a tendency when we have events, if we have an opportunity to support our small businesses, but additionally to have some of our local officials there to help us launch this nonprofit. So Elimu Community Center, it's in Middle River, and this place has been there there was a time we were at a different location. This place has been a hub for the community for a long time. We host, birthday parties have been hosted there, churches fellowship there, prayers are had there. But in addition to what most people know, we have also provided services such as partnering to create a food drive, to have a food drive at that location, which went on throughout the pandemic. We also had the opportunity to distribute COVID vaccines when it's at a location that's comfortable for our population, at a time where going into hospitals might not have been comfortable for many people, which is a great accomplishment. And all of this is through partnerships with other nonprofits and for-profit businesses within our community, being Kenyans, but then also within Baltimore County. So I'm hoping to have one of our senators there. Maryland, we have 2 senators. One of them is currently out of country because
U.S. senators or Maryland's?
U.S. senators. So one
U.S.
of them
senators,
is currently
okay.
out of country on an envoy, given the current conflicts that are going on. But if we're able to have Senator Van Hollen. We would love to have him. And in addition to now our state senators and our state local officials who have been so supportive of us up until this point. So if you've ever been a person who has called Baba Mwara, my father, and had an emergency that required an official to answer the call, that's operated in that Elimu Center, the individuals there, the relationships that we've had to be able to support our community members. Sometimes it's to get a way to make sure that they can get back home. Sometimes it's something to do with making sure that they can transport a body back home and their certificates needed. There are nuanced things that happen in our community that having a nonprofit and also having a connection and relationship with those officials around us can really help our community. And so I'm very excited about that. So that's on October 28th, which is the coming, not tomorrow, but the Saturday coming after that. It's going to be at 7 p.m. at the Elimu Community Center, which is on 9600 Pulaski Park Drive, and it's Suite 115. Many of you have been there and are familiar with the location. It has operated as a for-profit, but we're using the benefits of the nonprofit status so that these things that we have funded ourselves for so long can actually be funded not only by grants that are federal, but private grants and fundraising opportunities like the one we're having on Saturday.
Okay, amazing work. So that's going to be Saturday, the 28th of December. Not tomorrow, but the following Saturday.
28th of October.
28th of, I said October. Okay, all right. We can go back. We can rewind and check.
Everything is recorded.
Okay, now there's this. I don't know that this is a gift that you brought for me, but it says Annette Karanja.
Can it be seen?
Yeah, I don't know whether it can be seen. It says Annette Karanja. Maybe you can try to get it closer to the, and don't put, like your ugly.
Don't put your
fingerprint
thumbs on it, please.
Yeah.
Because
So Annette, talk to us about what this is right here. It says Annette Karanja Public Service Award 2023, Eastern 2023. And I cannot read the other side.
Right. So there were several. There were 3 awardees for Baltimore County. Baltimore County was divided into 3 sections: Western, Central, and Eastern. And one person was nominated for that. Was selected for that award for each of those regions. So that's why you see the word Eastern on it. I was the one who was selected for the Eastern area, and you get voted by the Central Committee of Baltimore County. So all of those individuals. Now, many of you might not know who the Central Committee are, but
that's a local chapter of the Democratic Party.
They're very important people because they make sure, like, for example, when you don't have a sitting a delegate or a senator, they're the ones who select someone to replace them until the next electoral process. So these are very important people, and they support the party. And the Public Service Award is just a recognition of the work that's being done in the community. Things that you have mentioned in my intro, being on the New Americans Task Force. I've also participated in some of the work that the comptroller is doing to create more access to the office and an understanding of what the comptroller does. I'm very excited about that as well. And just making sure that people have the opportunity to vote. So probably my favorite thing that I have done recently, voter registration, helping make sure that not only are you registering properly electronically, but having the support and even people who speak Swahili and other languages so that it can be a more comfortable process. That's my favorite
Annette,
thing.
when are you running for office?
When am I running for office? It's a very interesting question. I have not declared anything as of yet.
Oh, Lord. She's speaking like a politician.
Okay.
We already see where this is going.
So you can't confirm or deny?
She can't confirm or deny because she has not declared. So you can't declare if you have not confirmed and if you're not.
Eastern District elections in open up when?
What was that?
Eastern District elections.
When are the District elections opening up?
So the district that I'm in goes every other year. So not the year of the presidential election, but
so it's
other,
this year.
So
this
November.
So
that it's 2 years. So not every other year, but every other election is what I meant to say. So now we have elections every 2 years, right?
Okay.
So This coming one is the presidential one. Everyone in my district gets to relax.
Okay.
And then the next.
And then
So
the next one
you're
is
running
when-
on the next. You're on the next.
So
So we're
2026
looking
is
at
very
20,
far.
we're looking at 2026.
And that's
2026,
Quite
far
not
away.
okay. So
Yeah.
so they ran
Team
when
Annette, vote for Annette.
They ran
last
the
year?
last year.
Last year, okay.
they ran. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, they ran last year. And so there are a lot of interesting things that are going on in my specific district. And I am excited to see where that goes. The county council, there are individuals who want to expand the county council. We have an all-male council right now. There is no woman on the county
So
council.
is it because the woman was
You see,
there
that's
were
why
no
she's running in
candidates? There were no
2026.
candidates who were elected, or nobody run as a female and
there
got
were
elected.
two women that ran.
Okay.
One lost in the primary,
In the
so that
primaries,
seat was
yeah.
gonna go to a male.
Mm-hmm.
And then the other one lost in November to a she was running as a Democrat, and she lost to a Republican incumbent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So are they trying to either add more seats, or are they going to add seats that are specific for females?
That's currently no,
No,
not
that-
going to
that-
be specific for
That's a
females.
Kenyan thing. Don't think
No,
Kenyan.
no. I mean,
That's
I'm
a fair
asking. I'm
question.
asking legitimately because
Women rep, that's a Kenyan thing.
Because it's not like we don't have Title IX, right?
So for this, the process has to be the same process for everyone. So you have
Understood.
to
Yeah.
be duly elected. However, there is a desire to expand for multiple reasons. The amount of seats that are there comparative to the size of the county and the population that there seems that it's too much for too few people.
So there's
the
not
idea
enough. The
is-
ratio is not enough.
Right. So
for
the
the reps.
idea is you can tackle it one of two ways. One, we can add more, like 3 or 4 more seats, and break up the way that it currently is. So some of these larger districts would then become smaller. Or you can have at-large members.
At-large,
And
okay.
so as of my most recent understanding is that they were going to do basically find exploratory findings on what might work, a feasibility study of that.
Commission of Inquiry.
And so what advocates though want is for it to be a ballot question come November. So
Okay. Yeah.
we'll see how that
this-
goes.
Montgomery
November.
Montgomery County, they actually added the seats. I believe it was in the last county elections that we had, and it was through a ballot initiative that those seats were added to Montgomery County, because also Montgomery County, the population had really gone up.
Risen, yes.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Now, the other thing, Annette, is that which is a bit off the radar, because there was so many things happening in the news this week. The speakership, and then the war in Gaza. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. had expressed interest in challenging President Joe Biden for the Democratic ticket next year. But then he's just announced that he'll be running as an independent.
Right.
Now, I know this is off the radar, and maybe a lot of people haven't been following him or haven't been following this, but tell us a bit about RFK Jr. and if the Democrats have a reason to be worried that there's a Democrat who is saying that he's going to run for president as an independent. Annette.
So RF Kennedy Jr., for those who don't know, this is Bobby Kennedy's son, and Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. He's the brother of the Kennedy
JFK.
president that we know, JF Kennedy. So the Kennedys have their legacy here in U.S. history. A lot of people are familiar with the name.
Bad luck.
So
Wow.
RF Kennedy Jr. decided that he was going to run. Now he got he has a very interesting life story. For those of you who don't know, he kind of had it rough when he was younger. He got addicted to drugs and kind of was not the person that the family would love to talk about.
Wasn't the Kennedy.
Right, having that name. He cleaned up his act, became an environmental lawyer, and was very successful. And at that time, he became now the jewel of the family, pride and joy. He was very successful at litigating and making sure that areas were, protected, that there was, people were being held accountable when it came to environmental issues. So as time progressed, there were some individuals who saw him as a good person to talk to when it came to issues of vaccination, and, you know, not wanting to vaccinate. So the, you know, anti-vaxxers and things like that. And his association with that then caused the family to want to disassociate a little bit with him, because that's not something that they agreed with being a mainstream position for you to take publicly. So when he announced to run for president, it was not necessarily surprising in that he is a Kennedy. So some of us are like, oh, another Kennedy. But it was surprising because he's an environmental lawyer. It didn't really seem to be his area of expertise. And with some of the statements that he made during COVID, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, going back to the anti-vax positions that he has aligned himself with. So running as an independent is not something that we usually talk about, because basically it's either a Republican or Democrat,
yes.
in this country. So why would an independent be important? Well, it's important if he has enough followers or enough
Correct.
people who
Yes.
are going to vote for him, which means that they're taking from one party or the other, or from both parties. So
Yes.
when he announced that he was running as an independent, everyone was scared. So the Republican Party released a statement that same day, I believe, if not the next day, and I think it was titled 23 Reasons Why You Shouldn't Vote,
Yeah.
or for RFK and Jr.
Oh, now he became a darling for the Republican
So
Party.
they released a statement and passed it out to say, you know, this is why he's dangerous. The Democratic Party is never going to support someone against a current sitting
An incumbent.
anyone, like
Correct.
whether it's regardless of whatever position they're in. They will they are not going to do that. If you happen to beat them in the primary, then you'll get the full support of the party, but they're not going to actively campaign against someone who is currently.
Yes.
And traditionally, we've seen that incumbents typically never get challenged. You know, like if you're president, you know, your first term and you're going into your second term, the other party will have a primary. But you see, like the Democratic Party right now, they're not having a primary because
Right.
Joe Biden is the incumbent. There's actually precedent to challenging a sitting president that goes back to 1980. I think Omosh might have been in his 20s then.
He was a pollster then.
Yeah, the I think it was President. What was the president then?
Reagan or Jimmy
Not
Carter?
Reagan. Jimmy Carter. Jimmy Carter and Bob Kennedy is the one who ran against Jimmy Carter in the primaries. Now the president prevailed, but it left the party scarred. And guess what happened? Jimmy Carter went on and lost to Ronald Reagan.
We know why.
You know, like in the party, there was also the issue
The
with the Iran. There was the Iran issue.
That one is the one that.
But then it scarred the party. That primary run scarred the party, and since then, there's no president from either party who's had a primary challenge. But then we have precedent with people running either on smaller parties or running as independents. When we go back to 1992, you know, like we had Ross Perot, who ran, who I think ran as an independent.
Yes.
And some people claim that Ross Perot is the one who gave Bill Clinton the victory. Because remember, Bill Clinton beat, you know, like George Bush who was an
Senior.
incumbent.
Yes.
And then when we go to the 2000 election,
Ralph Nader.
Ralph Nader was on the election where George W. Bush was running against Al Gore.
Yes.
And there was an issue in Florida. So Ralph Nader had a very big impact.
Oh, the Green Party.
Yes, in that election. So there's some precedent to this. So
And
What
it's
about
very
2016? What about 2016?
who ran in
There
2016?
was a lady, Mary somebody, who took away some of Hillary's. She did get some
Yeah.
votes, and it was instrumental. It was actually instrumental.
Was that the lady, the one who used to be the HP?
No,
Not
not that one. There's another lady. I'm sure we can pull it up.
Yeah.
But I was also going to add
Okay.
to that, guys who can do Madhagondanyo. Joe Lieberman apparently has a joint called No Label Group.
A
And-
party?
yes, and he's thinking of And he's an independent. Isn't he
Yeah.
an independent?
Yeah, he's an independent. He left the Democratic Party.
And he, if he was to, because they explore, just like Annette, they're exploring.
No, Annette has not declared. She's not exploring.
Okay. She has not declared.
She has not
Exploration
declared.
has been done.
Exploration committee is for this chap.
Yes.
she can't
committee.
confirm or
She can't
deny.
confirm or
Ah,
deny.
she done
She's not.
exploration.
She would have said she's exploring.
But if Joe Lieberman apparently, because if it just so happens that is going to take away. That is for sure.
Now, I think people need to understand.
And
that
also, what's his name? Left. He also became an independent. I don't know.
Christian Cinema,
No. The Cornel West.
Cornel West. Well, the thing that people should be concerned about,
My bad.
there are 4 states that I think will play a big part in determining who's going to be the next president.
You already said too.
I have Georgia and Pennsylvania, and then I have Arizona and Wisconsin. Now these 4 states.
So you're not throwing in Minnesota and Michigan?
So I'll tell you. I'll tell you about. I'll tell you about Minnesota and Michigan. But these 4 states, these are clearly, according to the Cook Political Report, these are toss-up states, and the Republicans need to win 3 of these states, and they have the presidency, and that's Trump. Democrats need to win at least 2 of these states, and they have the presidency. Now, there's other states, likely Republican, like North Carolina. So if the Democrats work really hard, they might be able to play there. Then there's 2 other states. I think it's Nevada. There's one other state, and Michigan. Nevada and Michigan. Those are likely Democrat, but if we're not careful, the Republicans can have. I'm more concerned about Michigan. Personally,
I would say Nevada,
what I know.
but what do I know?
No, Nevada is actually.
I'd be more concerned with Nevada, but what do I know? Because remember, it's also a large.
But the good thing about Nevada,
more
Nevada, it may be big, but it only has 6 electoral college votes. Unlike Michigan, Michigan has, I think, 16.
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
I mean, if we can review, the electoral college is really what elects the president.
Absolutely.
Right? So
yeah.
each state, each individual votes, and then you have the electoral votes, and then those are added up, and that's what we count to determine, right? And so that's why when we've had these years, like I will never forget when Al Gore ran, and we were counting these numbers, and it seemed like what you hear is the popular vote is different from the electoral vote. That's
Correct.
how that happens, right?
Yes.
So you can have areas where you have a population that votes for one person, but if they don't have a lot of the electoral college, then that's going to impact differently than a state that has more. So that's basically what you're speaking to, and it's important to understand. And it's why when you see campaigns happening in certain states, like Trump has chosen, every time there has been a debate for the Republican Party, he has had a rally, and he's had these rallies in states where he has good Republican support because of the imagery of having that support there. But it's also going to be important to have now some rallies and have some interactions with populations in these toss-up states that you're discussing, finding out on the ground. So this is now what your central committees do. They find out on the ground what are the issues that people are concerned about. What would make them vote one way or another? Do you have individuals who are registered as one party but would be likely to run for another?
Swing.
A lot of times we hear about the polls that happen that we then hear on the news, but there's a lot of polling being done on the ground by central committees, and these central committees are for the Republican
internal party polls.
Yes,
Okay.
or for the Democratic Party. They then take this information back to the party and say, hey, this is what the constituents in this area are concerned about. So let's build our platform. Let's talk about this when we are campaigning and make sure that we can get, in this area. It's very strategic, right? So that's what's going to happen in these toss-up areas. So right now, there are people knocking door to door and figuring out what are the key issues. There are people who are attending the town halls and the local county meetings to figure out who is taking the time out of their day to go to these meetings to voice their concerns, and what are they saying. That's what's going to determine how they campaign. We still don't know what that ends up being until the day of the election, but it is important information to know. And if you didn't know what a central committee was prior to this, these are people who are elected as well. So when you go to your primary, depending on the area that you're in, there are people that you vote into these committee positions who do that work. So that's something that you can check out.
And I think with these primary elections, that's one thing that I'm very uncomfortable with the American democratic process, because I feel like most people who go to vote are seeing those names for the first time when they're walking, like at their polling place.
Hopefully they got the book and read it. I don't know.
No, most likely, people are not reading those books. So I think that there needs to be a way of alerting people on how to vote. I'll give you an example. When I took my mom to a polling place, she was telling me straight up, I'm going to look for a Muslim sounding name, and that's the person that I'm going to select. Straight up.
Because what does she have? Unless unless those flyers had come in the mail and she looked at them and something piqued her. Maybe sometimes it's the name of the person or the cause or something.
And
right?
unlike Kenyan elections, unlike Kenyan like polling, papers, unlike a Kenyan ballot, there is no picture. So you can't vote for someone because they look beautiful.
No, but I'm saying the posters that come in the mail.
Yeah.
Remember,
so
prior
those,
to
those
right?
that come in the mail, that's part of someone's campaign. That means
Correct.
that they have to have the money to be able to get
You're
house,
totally right. Yes, and a lot of them are mostly backed by the party. A lot of times you'll find, or they're like they kind of will say, okay.
So after the primary, definitely.
Okay.
So I think it's important for people who have an option for mail-in ballots, because I like mail-in ballots because you have the option of sitting without any pressure. And like, even if you choose, like, I'm gonna go online and figure out who these people are, and there's some very good websites,
Right.
I believe, like vote.org, Vote for and One. There's quite a number of websites that give you a summary. In fact, you need to go before even the primaries. You need to go and check and see who's representing
running,
you.
and who represents you.
A lot of times people don't even know who's representing them. You have state senators, you have state representatives. There's some states that have, like agricultural commissioners. There's some states that have registrars of wills. There's all kinds of positions. And then the more important ones, like the boards, like the Board of Education, for example. These are the people who are controlling what's going to be in your child's education curriculum. So such things. But people tend not to pay attention to those, and they're more important during primary season, because we're a partisan country, and most of the time in the general election, either Republican or Democrat is going to be elected. Annette.
I will say that the primaries are very important understanding, because now that is selecting who everyone will select, and I think a lot of times people might not participate in them as much or as frequently, but they're super important, because now if you do want someone in particular to progress, to be the one that you're voting for, like in this case, in this example with Trump, it is an assumption that Trump is going to be the nominee.
Yeah.
But if there was a question between Trump and somebody else, or if you have a primary where there's a question between one person or the other, then it's really important for you to participate in the primary. So in the state of Maryland, we do have the Senate race. And in the Senate race, there's only one Republican who is running. He's not really campaigning. He's not really fundraising. And so you can take that for what that means. There are two front runners from the Democratic Party who are running. And so that's going to be picked. That person is going to be selected in the primary. So the primary is happening, I believe, in March. I can't remember the exact date. In the state of Maryland, and so it's going to be between Angela Alsobrooks and David Trone. And David Trone is well known for his personal business. He has
he's my representative.
He's your representative.
Unfortunately, I voted for him because there was no other choice.
Okay, well that happens.
When you say there was no other choice, what does that mean in English?
The other choice was a Republican.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's David Trone, and he's currently in Congress, so he's familiar with the Capitol and working in the Capitol, and he has a lot of endorsements.
And what
from
about
his
Angela
time-
Alsobrook, for
from-
those who don't know her?
So Angela Alsobrook, she is the county executive in Prince George's County,
Okay.
and so she's been she's been all over Maryland campaigning, and she has been racking up a lot of endorsements within the state of Maryland. For those of our listeners who are in the state of Georgia, she recently got an endorsement from Warnock, which is
Senator Warnock.
yeah, Senator Warnock from the state of Georgia, which is a very impressive and big name endorsement.
Correct,
To get
yes.
from outside of the state of Maryland.
Okay.
And so, in addition to that, she does have a lot of support within the state of Maryland as well. David Trone has a bigger budget. He's more likely to have those flyers in the mail coming to your house. He's more
Yeah.
likely to have
More likely to be on your timeline.
on your timeline, and ads if you have them on Hulu.
Oh, I've
and-
seen them on TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah.
see that because there's the money for those ads, and that person is going to be selected in the primary. It's very important for Marylanders to get out and vote and select who they want to represent them in the Senate.
Okay.
Is all that money spent a tax write-off? I'm just curious. Sorry.
So that is a question for another day.
Okay.
But you do have to do FEC reporting, and so it's public information.
Yeah.
And you can go and see how much each party has raised. So the last time that I checked, I know that David Trone had 10 million in his
Kitty.
Yes, and then Angela also Brooks has raised, and her fundraise. So he's self-funded. Her fundraising is more grassroots small donors, and that has come up to the last FEC. I believe reporting was about 1.5 million that
Okay.
she's been able to raise up until this point.
Okay, now for people who are not from Maryland, now we know that in the U.S. Senate, the term is 6 years, but the elections are staggered, meaning like every 2 years, there's 33 seats that are up, 34 seats that are up for re-election. So for people who are not in Maryland, for example, why should they be concerned about who is going to become the senator, or even in these other states where like you'll be having elections for senators?
The same reason we were concerned here when it came to Georgia, when it came to Warnock's race.
Okay.
It made national news, yes, but regardless of what state you're in, when you are a senator, you are voting on behalf of all of the American people, because
Okay.
each state has two
senators. Yeah.
And you have to vote, and if there's a majority, it's one of your actually both of your representatives are going to be the ones who are voting, as well as representatives in other states. So it's good to have representatives that have your values or are going to vote on behalf of the things that are important to you, even in other states, especially when it comes to our Congress.
And what's a balance of power right now looking like in the U.S. Senate?
That's an interesting question. I want to look that up, because I know that we've had some
Changes and
Some
people who switched.
Some
is
people
that
who switched parties.
yes, and that is something that is that
concern?
hasn't really happened.
So Christian
historically.
cinema, historically, it's not happened while someone is actually occupying office. To me, that was kind of unprecedented.
Right.
But then you have currently the people the people who are Democrats, and plus those who caucus with the Democrats, I think, in the majority, because you have to remember Senator Bernie Sanders is an independent. He's not a Democrat. A lot of people don't know that. Bernie Sanders is an independent. And then you have Senator Joe Manchin, West Virginia senator, who's a Democrat, but likes behaving like a Republican. And I think, like his seat is up for re-election. And that's one of those competitive seats, that could go either way.
So what I like about being a part of a community that goes beyond my state lines is that I can now talk to people in some of these states and say, hey, how are you guys voting? Like, what is going on in your area, and what are the conversations that are being had, because they do have an impact, right? So we do have 3 independents in the Senate.
And who are those?
I did not look up who
Okay,
they,
but we
who
have
they were,
three of
but
them.
We have three, right?
Yeah.
That is very interesting because it's not very typical to have independents in the Senate, and three is significant. If
I
there's
believe
only
it's
100,
Bernie Sanders. The one from Maine, is she called
Like a lady. There's like a lady.
a lady?
The-
Yeah, Olympia.
No.
But
she's from
Nika
Maine.
Shosho. Nika Shosho.
Yeah,
Nika
and,
Shosho.
and then there's Christian Cinema from Arizona.
But I thought Barry Sanders was from Maine. I mean,
No, Bernie Sanders is from Vermont.
Vermont.
Yeah.
Well, they're next door to each other, so
Yeah.
difference is the
so
same.
that so three is a lot.
Yeah,
and
it's a lot.
And if you want to get something done, you have to talk to those three. So
Yep.
as much as they seem like a small group, they're very powerful in
Yeah.
that they have to be consulted regardless of if it's a Republican or a Democrat that wants to get something through the Senate. So whoever is having a
Angus
Senate,
King. Sorry.
All right, great,
Angus
thanks.
King from
Angus
Maine.
King.
Yeah.
So, whoever is running for Senate is going to be important for all of us. In the state of Maryland, I think that it does not seem. I don't think that there has been any polling that I can quote right now about how things are leaning, but there's definitely clear indications as far as endorsements are concerned. Endorsements are not everything because
Correct.
someone can say I like you. That doesn't mean
You're
1,000
gonna get
people
the
are
goods.
gonna yeah, like yeah. So 1,000, that doesn't mean that you're gonna have that poll. Now the idea might be that if you have a county executive who has this particular amount of votes that they themselves won, that then those votes would go to the person that they are endorsing. That's the idea. Doesn't always work out that way. So we shall see. Also, Brooks has I know she has the Baltimore County Executive's endorsement. She has the Speaker of the House endorsement, which are some, for me, I'm in Baltimore County, but the Speaker of the House, of course, represents, is the Speaker for all of Maryland. So that's some pretty big endorsements within the state, in addition to others. And I'm pretty sure getting closer to the primary date, there are some individuals who are holding out in their endorsements who are going to reveal whom they're endorsing between her and Trone. Trone has gotten support from the representatives of the area that he represents currently, in addition to a lot of his colleagues in Congress, which I think is remarkable, which is a good indication of his ability to work well with his other colleagues.
Okay, now there's a comment here that's coming from Walter Pio. And Walter says 100% panelists, the local elections are very important, but most folks, especially Democrats, don't pay attention to the local elections, midterms, and the primaries. They only show up every 4 years. That's a big mistake. By that time, your kid's school may have been moved or zoned to another school district and gas station built right next door. That's very true. And I've been in those zoning meetings, and people get so passionate. In Montgomery County, most people started getting wind of it when the lines had already been drawn. When you bought this house because you wanted your child to go to this school, but you're told, oh, sorry, from next semester,
year, your child is going to go
people
to the
across this road, you're going to this
You're
other
going to
school.
go to the other side, yeah.
And there's nothing you can do about it. And then Slay says, please talk Texas. And then Walter Pugh again says, also Senator Dan Feinstein, California, just passed recently, but the seat is safely Democratic. LaFonze Butler has been picked by California Governor Newsom to replace her. Yeah.
Future president.
Texas is a very interesting prospect because it's it's no longer necessarily reliably red, but it's likely red, like it's kind of pinkish, and that's because of the big cities. We're talking about Houston,
Yes.
Dallas,
Austin.
I think of
Austin.
the top 10 largest cities in the country, there are 3 in Texas.
Yes, I think Dallas, Houston. I don't know that San Antonio is part of that, but also San Antonio is also part of the play. And I think Texas is an interesting prospect. I'm not sure if Ted Cruz will be running in this upcoming election.
He
but,
might not. I don't think he's going to get reelected.
But there's always been an interesting challenge from I'm forgetting the name of this guy, Beto O'Rourke, who actually gave him a run for his money
The last time Right,
that he did that. So to me, Texas is always interesting because it's always considered as one of those states where people feel like at some point it could become a purple state rather than a red state.
It's interesting too when you look at the fact that a lot of people have moved there, and then you also have military towns there too, right? So there is not a monolithic population there the way that it has been in many years. And I'm starting to see, especially now that there is remote work, that people are leaving their congested cities and working remotely in Texas. And it also has tax benefits for you to do that. And so
the Californians are going there.
We are already seeing, and I'm seeing people from New York going to Texas as well. That's a very congested, Manhattan's very congested. And so what we're going to see is some shifts that we can't necessarily anticipate because the census already happened, and that happens every 10 years, right? So we're going to have to wait for some of these more incremental census information or demographic information to come out of Texas, which is going to be very curious to see.
Yeah, that demographic of voters is very interesting. I think there's a lot of millennials in there, and those people vote. It's definitely not on party lines. It's based upon issues and whether they're feeling you or not. And if they're not feeling you, you ain't getting jack. But if they're feeling you, they're with you 188%.
And then also the money in Texas is very interesting. We have a lot of businesses that are there. We have a lot of multimillionaires who are based there as well, again, for tax purposes and also because of space. You know, if you're living in a congested town and you need to do some manufacturing or have some warehouse space, Texas is a better place to go. And so
tell them that Baltimore also has places. I mean, there's all those rundown factories that
I'm not sure how I could sell that, but what that means is that the money, as far as supporting campaigns, especially these national campaigns, where you can get support from some of these bigger billionaires and millionaires, is going to then also tip the scales as well. Are those people, you know, leaning red? Are they leaning blue? Or are they leaning in a direction because it's going to benefit them for that particular term?
Yeah, the Supreme Court. Sorry.
All right. And I want to remind the listeners that you tuned into the One Mic Show, and I'm your co-host and producer, Ali Badawi. Our guest host tonight is our U.S. political and cultural contributor, Ms. Annette Karanja. Now, Annette is a political activist with the Democratic Party and recently received a public service award in her local Baltimore chapter. We just showed it to you. Now, she's here tonight. We're talking about the conflict in Gaza, and also we're talking about elections 2024. Now, we'll shortly be talking about the failure to elect a speaker in the U.S. House of Representatives and how that may impact next year's election. So I want you to stay tuned for that. And of course, the lines are open at 202-683-4570. Press *5 to speak. But before we continue, Uno Mike, later on in the show, you know, as we're getting close to wrap up, we're going to be recapping last week's interview with Swahili Village CEO Kevin Onyona. You know, maybe briefly tell us what listeners should expect to hear in this discussion, or maybe what we want to hear from listeners about what they got from the interview. It
will be interesting to find out because we had those you may attend Kamkunjis after the show, and you know, I think one thing was many people probably did not read the indictment, and on top of that, they probably did not get a chance to also see the response. Right? And no, even us going in, we knew very well, chances are of us technically being told, you know, plead the fifth, you know, because of this and that, the other, was the likelihood.
Was very
but
high.
I think we were able to establish, I believe that we were able to navigate within the restaurant and within that industry and the service industry, and what happens, what goes on, without him not necessarily, you know, jeopardizing the case. But it's going to be interesting. Of course, the people who expected more. They wanted him to come out and say yes, you know, or they wanted him to categorically to say, no, we don't pay minimum wage. This is how much we pay be tipped minimum wage.
So people are looking for black and white answers.
Yeah, they
Yes,
wanted
and
him
they
to
were not.
say it wasn't me, even though the videotape is there or something
Yeah.
like that.
or something like that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I guess what I would want to know, like from the listeners, and we're going to be talking about this a little bit later on, is I was a bit surprised. And what I've come to learn is that in such interviews, you should also, in your mind, you should also not expect something. You should just wait and see what's going to come out of it. But we're
Very
human.
true.
We're human at the end of the day.
Right.
And what I had thought with all the chatter that we're getting and all the calls we're getting before the interview, I had imagined that everybody who was against him
By
will
the
go
way-
gung-ho. They will be calling. They will be
They'll
commenting.
shoot from the hips.
They'll
and
shoot from the hips. So
because
I was
we
surprised.
got a lot of stuff
got- especially
before
the
the,
act-
So
before the
I
show.
was, because remember, us guys we were not here to adjudicate.
No.
We're just here to create a platform for him to tell his side of the story. But I was surprised that all these people who are saying that he's done
What one
this
you
and
may
that,
attend
yeah,
did not call.
yeah. So
did not-
I was a bit surprised.
I was shocked.
Yeah.
Because and again, we'll discuss it. But it's something that I sort of had to let it be known that the opportunity to say something was there.
Yeah,
In as much as somebody may have been aggrieved, and if let's say you're not part of it, ama ulitoka mapema ni sawa. You call in, say your piece,
yeah,
what you went through as a person or as an employee in that environment, and then either he'll comment or he'll be like probably no, but it's out there.
Okay.
But nobody did. But anyway, we're
gonna talk about
delve
that.
into that.
Yeah, and before we go back, Kenyan Jui here is saying, Annette, I could listen to you all day.
Oh Lord, Kenyan Jui, why is it sounding like Pablo?
Wait a minute, let me finish. Kenyan Jui says, Asante, I could listen to you all day. I would get instantly saved if you became a pastor. That's Kenyan Jui. Okay,
I think we should- we need-
You've converted Kenyan Jui. Kenyan Jui was
He's a
going hard on you at the beginning.
hard stance guy.
Yeah.
He's a hard
Yeah.
stance guy. I don't
Yeah.
know how you did it.
He was
I really don't know.
He was actually going hard on you at the beginning, but he's kind of softened up.
and I'm wondering, especially
Yeah.
for coming from somebody who said that they are not declaring one way or the other.
Well,
I mean,
He
'cause
gave her.
she may or may not become a pastor.
okay. And then
You never know.
Slay Odwar was asking, how do you find if there are zoning meetings? That's a very important question.
I love that question so
yeah.
much.
Yeah, just address that a bit. How do you
Well,
find if there are zoning meetings?
If you are in the state of Maryland, I would say that you would go to your county or city website, and that information should be posted there clearly. And I would say should, because unfortunately, especially when it comes to areas where there might be developers involved and things like that, it might not be as clearly stated. But there are laws saying that there needs to be public hearing when it comes to things like zoning. So the first place to search is going to be your local the website for the government. The next place I would say to search is your local newspaper and the person who job it is to report specifically in that area. Ooh. So if you have East County Times, that's a generic name I came up with, or something like that, there's going to be a person who is dedicated to it. Or even National Public Radio, if you have your local
NPR
chapter of that, and then they're going to have a person who is dedicated to doing the politics of a certain area. So Baltimore County, Baltimore City, they have different reporters, so on and so forth. Their job is to report on that stuff. That's a great place to look because they will discuss it, not only when the meeting is, but a recap of those meetings.
You know the other place, and this might be a bit interesting, drive-bys. You know, yeah, because I've done drive-bys randomly, not looking for them.
By what, City Hall
but
or
I'm
by
seeing,
the...
No, just by even when like they're building, like when they're building, let's say like a new community,
Correct.
There's usually a big
board, yes.
A big board.
And then they'll say...
Very hard to read, especially if you're driving.
No, you have to stop.
Yeah, you have to stop.
Yeah, because those things I don't think, they're not written for you and me. They're written for that inspector guy who comes up there.
Yeah, exactly.
But they usually say like what it is zoned for, so it will have a zoning code which you can look up.
And if there's gonna be a meeting,
if it's gonna be a business, if it's
I'm glad you clarified drive-by.
Yeah.
I was waiting.
Yeah, I was waiting. I was like, what?
No,
No,
you
drive-by.
see, Ali, you can't say that around Baltimore people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Oh, I forgot.
I was waiting.
Because
You know,
they would have pulled up the Tusker t-shirts and the
The
Timberlands.
Timberlands.
Yes,
Hey.
in
Yeah.
6 seconds.
We are on high alert.
Annette, you see, look, they're ready.
I was very concerned.
We are
They're
high
ready.
alert.
Annette, yeah, she was ducking already.
I'm
No,
still from Baltimore.
No, but
so.
by drive-by, I just meant, you're driving
Literally
by.
No,
driving
you
and
see,
then-
by.
even the way you're holding your
No,
hand,
please.
that you've already violated. You cannot.
Don't bother with
Okay,
Daniel.
okay.
And these are the cultural things that
All right.
that are important to
bus
clarify.
school.
All right. Fair enough.
Yeah.
We're gonna add that in our part
It's
2
like
conversation.
it's like
Right.
YouTube people.
Right.
Yeah, I'll leave it at YouTube people.
No, YouTube people, it was a brain freeze. I was suffering a brain freeze. But anyway, Walter Pio says Newsom is a future president. It's a possibility. I don't know about that.
That guy is ready. He's ripe and ready.
And then Slay Odwar says Colin Allred is the dam that wants to challenge Cruz. That's interesting. So I think then Cruz might be up for re-election next year. And then Washeke says California people have moved here and brought their liberal politics. Okay. Washeke is from San Antonio.
Please, fafanua on that, please.
Yeah. Yeah, Washeke fafanua on that, what you mean by they brought the liberal politics. And then Walter Pio
She's not
says,
liking the rate of electricity now.
Walter Pio says,
It's cuffing season.
just call your local mayor's office and they will provide you with a calendar. But I think these things should be easier. I don't think it should be that complicated that you even
Excuse
have to
me.
pick up a call.
Kenyans want to vote from their bedroom.
And yeah,
Okay?
yeah.
Let that sink in.
Oh,
Okay.
Lord.
Now here's the thing. There
You've
are
gone back
some-
there.
Madrid Kenyans only.
You've gone
No,
back.
no.
You've gone back there.
I'm going there.
Wow.
You remember when we were given the opportunity to even be able for a chance to vote?
That's a story for another
day. But I just
that's
say-
a long story.
Hey.
That's a long
I saw
story.
this one coming from a mile away.
Gaze.
It was
That's
coming.
a long story.
It was
Bedroom.
coming. It was
Probably
coming.
like where Mika is chilled on the on the sofa and a comforter, probably.
Maybe
Okay.
they wanna connect via
Even-
Bluetooth to hit the Bonyeza here
Saskia.
to vote.
Even
Wi-Fi.
Annette didn't register. Even Annette didn't
Okay.
register.
No,
so-
let's
so
not.
I think
Annette is
we'll,
ours. We can't do that
yes,
for Annette.
but
Annette
she
is-
didn't register.
Annette is ours. We can't
But
do
she
that.
didn't register.
These are
I'm
things
just
we should
reminding
say
you.
outside
Hold on. You
Yeah.
may
the
attend.
studio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
attend.
but it's for clarity purposes.
For clarity.
It's good just to
Yeah.
be aware. Excuse
Yeah.
me. I see she's rolling her eyes.
Are they rolling?
You see?
Oh no.
But we is ready. We Baltimore. We is ready, God.
Annette is still at the drive-by. She's still stuck there.
YouTube people, man. YouTube people.
Rolling down the streets.
Oh my.
So,
Come on, guys. English is a second. It's interesting.
ilikuja na meli.
It's interesting when I find Kenyans.
Ilikuja na meli?
When I find Kenyans who pretend, like I came here, I learned English here. You remember, like that Kenyan chick who went on this show, the Ellen show, Ellen DeGeneres, and
The
she
comedian?
No. There was a Kenyan chick who was being interviewed. I don't know. No. It was a
She's-
random chick, not the comedian, not Elsa
She's
Majimbo.
what's her name? You
Yeah,
know, she's very popular on Instagram.
Yeah, it's not Majimbo. It's
no,
not
no.
Elsa Majimbo.
It was
this
a-
other chick.
it's a Luo chick.
It's a Luo chick.
Yes,
she was
and
claiming,
she lives in New York.
She was claiming that she learned English from watching the Ellen show. And KOT. She said that and KOT was there. And yeah. And she was massacred.
She's very popular though.
Yeah.
Extremely popular.
yeah, but she was massacred.
Extremely.
You
On
know.
YouTube with YouTube.
No, Insta.
She was massacred.
For-
but,
she may have. I haven't seen her stuff on YouTube, but she's very.
But her supporters are probably YouTube people.
They could be.
they're Twitter people. They're Twitter
No,
people.
even YouTube people.
No,
Because they watch Ellen DeGeneres.
Okay, so hata tuendelee. Let's let that go. Let me see.
Not to YouTube.
Oh, Washeke says over here, right now the Republicans are scared of losing a foothold with the millennials voting, and that's why they are fighting to continue gerrymandering, even in cases where the Supreme
But-
Court has made decisions to carve out additional districts which would benefit Democrats.
Like in Alabama, for example.
Alabama, easy, and it was Alabama, right? And they said
Alabama was one of the states. There was a couple of states. I don't know that Pennsylvania was also one of the states, but there was a couple of southern states
Yes.
that were affected, and this is gonna tilt the balance of power. in the Congress, because you can see, you can tell what's happening right now with the speakership, where you need at least 217 votes to become speaker. The Democrats have been solid. They've been voting for Hakeem Jeffries. But the Republicans tried with Scalise. Scalise did not even go...
A little round one.
No. He did not even go on to...
He didn't even leave the close.
Hakufika round one, like
hata kwenda round one.
studio.
Yeah, and then who was after Scalise is when they got
The GYM guy.
the Jordan, Jim Jordan, the Jordan guy who has gone now for I think 3 rounds, and
each round he keeps losing.
he keeps losing more
and
votes.
he's losing different votes. So
Yeah.
that's the interesting thing, because you usually go in expecting that you're going to have the same supporters, and then hopefully you've tacked on somebody else.
Yeah.
But with him, he's gone,
Yeah.
lost 3 additional ones or 3 different ones.
Even former Speaker Boehner alipata kura.
John Boehner.
Yes.
And you know,
Somebody suggested. I'm like,
and you know, here's the interesting
Yani
thing.
muhadhara.
The U.S. House of Representatives, you can vote for someone from the outside.
Yes.
You know, and it's been a norm to vote for someone in the inside. But I think I like when these situations come up, because people get forced civic lessons, whereby, you know, because Trump's name was being mentioned, and I was asking myself, Trump?
Yeah.
Then that's when I learned that, you know, like, you can actually get someone from outside. And I think at this point, that might be what they may
So
be
there are
forced to
things
do.
that
Jamie?
are there are
Yeah.
things that are the law and the way that it has to be done, and then there are things that are precedent, the way things have always been. And so
Okay.
that's how, like you're saying, that civic lesson, you learn that some of these things that are the way things are because
That's how it's been done
tradition,
before.
and that's how it's been done.
Yeah.
But not necessarily that is legally required for it to be done that way. And so I think, yes, this is a great civic lesson. We're seeing some things that have not happened in history before. The situation, the way that we came here with the ousting of the previous speaker. is unprecedented. And I think this is very interesting to see. So for, you know, our Republican listeners, I think it's very interesting if you have been a longtime Republican, even those who are not Republicans, if you've watched how the Republican Party has moved, they tend to have their closed door meetings and they come out in agreement, right? And
Correct.
even the dissenters are not going to speak about their dissent.
So you would know who's
Unless-
dissenting.
Right,
Yes.
unless it's something that they think is like imperative for their constituents to know that they themselves
And it would affect their
dissented. Right.
election, yeah.
So that typically doesn't happen. This is a very interesting time to see such fracturing within the party, and that it's something that we are publicly aware of in this way, and that we can see this dysfunction. It's kind of like if you're having a dysfunctional family, that usually when you shut the doors, nobody knows what's going on, and then when you open the doors, you have your beautiful family photos
And everybody's
beautiful life,
smiling,
and
yeah.
everyone's smiling. And now instead, like, people are coming, hair's undone, earrings are out, like, you know,
People
they
doing
clear-
drive-bys.
like things that it's a very interesting thing to see right now. And I think what's happening is that we're also at a position as a nation where we're realizing that a few people are having such a huge impact in a way that is off balance, right? Because it is a few people who
The
decided
flamethrowers,
that the speaker needed to go.
8 people.
And now we are in this position.
But if I may ask, I mean, I'm sorry to I mean, but the Democrats are the ones who are responsible for McCarthy being ousted, as McCarthy said. It's the Democrats.
They didn't
who-
save him.
They did not save him, and they did not also support Jim Jordan. So they are responsible for not voting in or not keeping McCarthy. They are responsible for now not electing Jim Jordan. What is your response to that? Democrat Loma. Don't roll your eyes at me. I ain't scared. But Democrats are responsible because of not voting.
Sure, that is a statement that can be made, but were they acting or reacting?
It doesn't matter.
It does
At the end of the
It
day,
does matter.
there's no
If you were the one
no
who-
speaker.
Are you the one who lights the flame? Did you cause the fire to start, or are you reacting to the fact that there is a fire?
But
you
the
know?
Dems themselves ultimately voted.
But I think here's the thing. My question is, did McCarthy or Jim Jordan go to the Democrats and tell them, hey,
The 96% of the vote.
No, but did they go? But did they go ask for the vote?
But that is a Republican talking point, and they have been using it
Yeah.
on all media, blaming the Democrats for the debacle, blaming the Democrats for McCarthy, blaming McCarthy, that guy, for, and I'm like, but dude.
But
yeah,
anyway,
a very interesting
But you see
time.
now
I
that
think-
here's a funny thing. McCarthy is looking like the reasonable person. That's how far low that the Republican Party has gone.
Wacha
McCarthy is
waminyane.
now looking like the reasonable person, and now they're having to work with this Jordan guy. And
But
nobody
even
wants
Jordan
to
is
vote
over.
for him.
I think what's going to happen, pro temp guy, the bow tie guy,
They're gonna give him
Yes.
more powers.
he'll be speaker for 30. I think it's 30 days, right? That's
So
the
the
process.
idea is we don't want to get to another
shutdown. Yeah, which is
we
coming
need
up.
to make sure that the budget gets approved and
And
then
Ukraine monies
so
gets to Ukraine, and Israeli
Ukraine
money gets to
monies
Ukraine.
is a big part of it. Money to Israel is a big part of it, and that actually might be one of the reasons why people relent, because at some point, the government isn't functioning, and that has major ramifications. If we
There's an idiot who used to be a coach who has not even signed off, who's holding off on assignment of military personnel. The idiot.
No, that was
that's in the
resolved.
Senate. That was resolved.
That was
yeah.
Oh, it was resolved.
Yeah,
I
that
think
was
after he
resolved.
slipped on the plane on the stairs and bumped his head, I think he woke up.
Wow.
But carry on.
Wow. So that was resolved. And I think that was also very interesting to see, because the veterans organizations that I have followed have really spoke out against that particular delay.
Tommy
Of course-
Tuberville.
Of course, that has a huge implication to national security. So it makes sense. That's a very important thing that should have happened and been ratified very quickly. And to use it as a political tool that's very unprecedented. We haven't seen that. We really haven't seen that, and we typically do not see veterans organizations or military organizations speaking poorly about leadership in the way that I saw at this particular junction, which was very unique. Now, the military has a way of doing their communication, so and it's very important that they do so in that way. Now, the veterans are a little bit different. So it was very unique for me to see blatant, outright, negative ads being taken out by veteran organizations
Wow.
in relation to this issue. But yes, that has since been.
But now with this stalemate for the speakership, if this keeps going, you said that maybe they might give like the pro temp guy some powers. Are they going to give him the full powers of a speaker, or just some temporary powers
It really
to be able to
depends
pass?
on how the conversations start going. There are options to do just that. Is it likely? No, because when you have a temporary person, especially in this particular situation, it is meant to be very temporary.
Yeah.
And I think the odds are the Republican Party is going. Well, that's my opinion. I don't know that they're going to get it together and they're going to have some sort of a resolution.
Liz Cheney.
We don't know what the issues are that are being held up. The information that we do know about the dissent or the disagreement is based off of particular letters or leaks, but these conversations are happening between behind closed doors in their closed door sessions when they are dominating and doing their votes. And that's also interesting, because it seems as though when someone comes out, the number of votes that they had within those closed doors, and then by the time it gets to the floor,
Yeah, it's different.
it's different.
Things
So what
change.
happens when they walk out of that room and walk into the main Congress? I don't know what happens.
I don't think the U.S. Congress has brown envelopes. In the Kenyan Parliament, there are brown envelopes which are exchanged, like in the
In the
toilets,
bathroom,
in
yeah.
the bathrooms. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's where money is exchanged, and
If they're
now-
brown envelopes, we'll stick with brown envelopes.
numbers just change. Now, is there any chance that any minimal chance that Hakeem Jeffries could get in through the back door as a speaker?
So I think I'm not sure.
Okay.
Let me go with that answer. I am not sure.
That would be interesting because it would be the first time that someone from another party, someone from the minority party, gets the speakership over someone from the majority party. You know, like in recent past.
So now, I think whenever there is a conversation being had that seems unlikely, sometimes it's playing with fire because it might be something that's suggested to light a fire under the other side and say, hey, that we don't want that as an option, or that might not be, the best choice. But unfortunately, when you play that game in the past,
because here's the interesting thing. Hakeem Jeffries gets all the 212 Democratic votes. He only needs 5 Republicans.
From the other side.
Yes. He only needs 5. And if that happens,
which is possible,
which I think what they need to do, because right now they're doing it by standing up, it's public. I think they should change the rule
and make it private voting.
Make it secret,
or behind the door, and you walk to your guy and you tell him, "Hey."
I think that's going to give interesting results if they make it secret.
It would be fun to see.
It would be very fun to see.
I don't see it happening.
It would be a risky move.
It would be fun to see.
It would be a very risky move.
There's a bubbling, more or less, rumor. I don't know how, but it's a suggestion to propose Liz Cheney.
That's an interesting option, but those MAGA guys, they're not going to vote for her. Especially Liz Cheney, those 8 MAGA guys, those 8 extreme MAGA guys who took out McCarthy, those guys are not voting for Liz Cheney. I mean, Liz Cheney is the one who, vocally went against Trump. They're not. That's not gonna work now unless the Democrats decides to pull a coup and decide to vote for Liz Cheney. Because
that's what I was thinking.
Because you see, if Liz Cheney, maybe let's say gets 200 Republican votes, she'll only need 17 Democratic votes.
That's it.
Yeah, and she's gonna be the speaker.
So have the Democrats been staying out of the voting for now?
No, they're voting for Hakeem Jeffries.
All 212.
All 212 of them.
And that's the funny thing about playing with fire, right? So I just see it as a let's get these guys to get it together and give a proper have a realistic.
When is
that you guys
the budget is what, November, October, November?
We've been
12th?
saying around 30 days. So.
Is it November 12th, 14th, something like that, right? Because it was
which one, the appropriations bill?
Because remember, it was only for 30 days.
Yeah,
we were just given. It was just for 30 days so they could get their act together. And it was October 1st.
And that's.
Yes, sorry, October 1st. It will be November 1st is 30 days.
The next one, yeah.
Because remember, the new fiscal year started October 1.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to roll into October 1 without having a budget. And they came up with the interim, which was 30 days. So November, by end of October, in fact, next week, they need to be doing something so that they can come to terms and agree. So when November 1 checks in, we actually have a budget.
I'm hoping we have someone by then because, for example, if you have senators that are being sent out to these conflicts that are happening right now, they cannot come back and your relationship with the Senate is going to be severely dampened if we do not have a speaker and there's a government shutdown in the middle of a political envoy that's in Israel.
And I think there's a very high likelihood that we still won't have a speaker by then. And why do I say that? Because there are these two factions. There's this extreme MAGA faction, and then there's that moderate faction that's not going to vote for an extreme MAGA guy. So it's almost impossible to get one person who's going to be agreeable to the MAGA guys and to the moderates. So that's not happening.
Right.
That's why I think, if I'm Hakeem Jeffries' people, I call a couple of Republicans, to the toilets, like in the Kenyan parliament, and maybe try, move around some brown envelopes, because I don't see, I don't see these two.
You don't
groups
see those guys agree?
Those two groups, I don't see them agreeing with each other.
But they, at this point, where we are, knowing that we literally have, I'm going to give it 4 days, because you can't get to Friday next week when you're still sitting in debate. Because Friday next week is the 27th, which means come Monday, the week after,
You're already in November.
you need to be
And
you're
Thanksgiving
knocking. You're knocking. You're not
Thanksgiving is right
there,
around
but
the
you're
corner.
knocking, right? Because it's
Yeah.
gonna be 28th, 29th, 30th.
Yeah.
You're gonna be knocking, right? So you need by November 1, you need to have had something that you present to the president that he's signing. So
Well.
if you mess around with next week, it's a wrap. We're gonna have a shutdown.
Over here, let's see. Angie has a question here, I believe, or a comment or a statement. Karibu sana. Let's see. Hey,
Okay, so
Karibu
Angie,
Minotis.
yeah.
She's from Canada. Zoning boards are written in number 8 font. Allah, Kenyan Jui.
8 fonts.
Is she throwing right repair? Okay. Let me just go here. Alto Pio says, "Hey, I prefer in-person voting to read the mood on election day. But mail-in ballot is great, like Ali said. No pressure, and you can research. Did mail-in during the last general elections because of COVID?" Angie Decadence says, "Hi, Annette. Congrats on the Community Engagement Award. Can you share the specific strategies, resources to activate the democratic base in Baltimore County, especially those with voter apathy? Unfortunately, there's an ongoing narrative that Democrats lose elections when black people don't vote, e.g. Stacey Abrams and Sean Wilson, who lost gubernatorial seats for Georgia and Louisiana, right?
Louisiana.
Which were considered winnable elections. Altopio
necessarily.
says, no, the Democrats are not responsible for that mess at all. When Mike is dodging Annette's question, she asks, what set the ball rolling? You can't dismiss her point by saying it does not matter. He struck the match, burnt the place down, got the guys standing around enjoying the bonfire. Waltopio says, Ali, funny enough, brown envelopes were issued during the abolishment of slavery vote.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Kenyan Jui, to be specific, I wasn't dodging. I was just merely trying to play devil's advocate, because that is the talking point that the Republicans, Rithagli clans have been pushing and are pushing. If you listen to McCarthy, if you listen to another idiot that was being interviewed on CNN, those guys are adamant that Democrats are responsible. Even though when McCarthy was over there and they were sitting down and they agreed where only one person can initiate the process, hawataki hiyo, wanasema hapana, Democrats are responsible because
sometimes when we talk about our politics in African countries being dysfunctional, this is the peak of being dysfunctional.
Hold up. Didn't somebody call us shithole countries?
Yeah.
What are we experiencing?
Exactly.
Shithole politics.
This is the peak of being dysfunctional, where you cannot agree on, first of all, you go and torpedo, you already had a speaker whom you took 15 rounds,
Very many rounds.
to elect.
To bring them in, yes.
Yeah. You took 15 rounds to elect, and then now all of a sudden you decide that you don't want him because he's not, pushing your agenda, and then now you can't agree on anyone.
But
because they struck a deal with the Democrats to
avoid the shutdown.
avoid the shutdown.
Yeah.
To avoid the shutdown.
Yeah,
Yes.
to avoid the shutdown.
Which I find a little, that is very disheartening, because at some point in time there needs to be bipartisan agreement.
Exactly, yeah.
So it's just a part of the function and the way that the government has been structured since its establishment, right? There has to be some level of bipartisanship. So if that is the reason why you cannot continue with the person, that then makes me wonder, so whomever you get, does that mean that they'll never agree with
No,
Democrats?
but
Does that mean that they'll
the
never
MAGA
talk to
guys,
the
all the MAGA
Democrats?
guys, all they're looking for is they're trying to find a way to make Biden look bad. They're trying to find a way to make things not function for Biden. They want to find a way whereby they can just blame anything on him. So for them, they're like, you are helping. Why are you helping this guy? And he's not from our party. So for them, it's not about serving the Americans or anything. For them, it's about getting their guy elected again. And unfortunately,
again,
that's all
we're
MAGA
again
politics
talking
that's
about-
out there right now. Even from the funders, private people, when they speak, it's just getting their guy back to the White House.
We're talking about a small group and how much
It's-
power
Yeah.
they have. And that's something that I think beyond this conversation and beyond getting a speaker, there is going to be some serious conversations about how the structuring of Congress is, and is this going to be allowed again? I
Yeah.
believe that the next time the majority shifts, or if there might be a bipartisan thing, which is less likely.
I doubt.
But there is probably going to be a conversation about how
Changing the
can we
rules.
change the rules to make sure that the government doesn't cease for such a long period of
Yeah.
time, stop for such a long period of time because of the agenda of a few people. And now we're seeing it happened in the Senate, and now it's happening.
It's happening in
on
the House.
floor.
And these conversations were had before during the last government shutdown, and they didn't do anything. And I don't know when they're ever going to get to the point where they actually say, you know what, you guys can't hold us hostage because all y'all are being selfish. We need to continue functioning.
Because once upon a time, it was something that happened once, and then it
y-
happened
y-
again.
Correct.
And again.
And so now this is the point where it's no
With
longer
Republicans
an
in power.
isolated
Yeah.
event. It now is a pattern.
It's a pattern,
So-
yes, because this
yeah,
has
so
now
we're gonna
become
go-
a what is it called?
Strategy?
Yes, it's
It's
a
become
point
a
of
normal
contention,
tactic.
right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and
Yeah.
they know it's coming, and they're going to use it.
Yeah, but
and
anyway,
especially with the Republicans in power.
yeah, we are going to get back to this conversation. So hopefully we are going to have a speaker next week. Most likely, I don't think we're going to have one by the end of next week, but hopefully some magic happens and things start moving.
Maybe the angels from shithole countries will come in and do something.
Yeah.
Wow.
The
so,
prayers that were being offered.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So we want to get to the
This
last
is
part.
he's-
Yeah,
on the
so
same-
Shenanigans.
yeah, so want to get to the last part of the show where we're going to be recapping last week's interview with Kevin Onyona, Swahili Village CEO. He was here in studio responding to allegations of wage theft. And I think I'm going to start with Annette because we want to get a perspective from outside.
from the person who has not been here sitting and looking on in.
Someone who wasn't in the room because
Who has not been compromised? Hajapewa brown envelope.
She's when Mike gave a brown envelope over here that's thick with charges. I
Yeah.
think she's scheming through that. She's
Yeah,
about
and,
to.
and you know, and the reason I say that is because sometimes the temperature that's in here sometimes is different when someone is, like watching this from outside.
Correct.
So just give us your thoughts of what you have about that interview. Just I'm not even gonna ask positively. Just your overall thoughts. Like what did you feel about it?
Well, number one, I do appreciate that you guys had the actual document, the actual charges, and we're talking about that because a lot of times what we get is sound bites, from the media, and we don't actually know what is the contents or what the actual accusation is. And so I like to define terms when having a discussion, especially if the discourse is going to maybe be contentious. So having a copy of it to reference when having the interview, I thought that was really important. And I did appreciate that. I also like that it was clarified. We're talking about a specific location because Swahili Village has multiple locations.
Correct.
And so for many of us who maybe are familiar with the Beltsville location and have more connection to that, might have had a more visceral reaction given their experience with that location. And then at the same time, we had ribbon cutting being happening in New Jersey. And
In
it's
Newark,
kind of
yes.
confusing to see something like this in the news, but then at the same time you're having this big ceremony and
With
you're
the
being
president.
super successful and you
Yeah.
have the president and all of the optics that are coming with that. It's conflicting information, and as someone who is now receiving both of those things, it was very confusing. How are you being charged over here and then at the same time celebrating in New Jersey?
You're using
you
big
know?
scissors.
That was very interesting to me. I also thought, like you were saying, about the positive feedback that you got from the callers, the participation, you got more positive. And I thought that was interesting when I was listening to it because, it's good to sing praises. Give praises where they're due. I think that's very important. I was surprised that there weren't as much talk as what I saw online. Of course, when
The comments.
when the comments, the
initially
comments
when
the initial charges,
yes.
the article first went out, there was a lot of
Yes.
comments there. So that to me was a little bit surprising. I would have thought I would have heard more than that. I appreciate that you had him come on. I thought that was a little bit surprising, honestly, that he would.
Why did you think that was surprising?
I don't know who his PR person is or how you go about those things, but in a situation like this, sometimes it is not the best idea to rush onto a show and have a conversation about it, especially if you're going to spend a lot of time saying I plead the fifth. There is a lot of assumption that when you say that you can't speak on something that you're guilty. So sometimes the advice that you would be given from PR would be to not even have an interview because you're going to look guilty if you say I can't speak on that due to an ongoing investigation consistently throughout your interview. So that was very surprising to me that he would even come on the show and that he would talk about this and that it was I think it was good.
Do you feel that sorry to interrupt you,
No,
do you
it's okay.
feel that he skirted around the issue, or do you feel like he faced it head on and what he could not answer he did not answer? Or do you feel like he was covering?
I believe he came here on a mission, which I would not have advised someone in that position to come onto the show. But he clearly came here on a mission. He came here to humanize himself and make it less of this news clip and make him more of a person, which I think he did successfully. When you're having conversations about your relationship with the employees and the opportunities that you have created for those who have come to this country, and talking about talking about Swahili Village being a home base, the type of language that he was using was definitely very humanizing on his behalf. And we can definitely look at public figures and business owners and leaders in our community as objects sometimes, and we can be very harsh on them and forget the fact that they are people too and they do have families and that these things are consequential for them in a very human way. So that was interesting, and I think if that was his goal, I believe that he accomplished it.
Did he did you like before the interview? I mean, of course you've been reading through all these stories. Now before the interview, after the interview, and I'm not asking what your view is, but whatever your view is, did it change? Did it stay the same?
I think I had a few more questions about the integrity of the claim that was being made against him, just because of some facts that were discussed on the show. So if we're talking like who are all of these people that are making this claim, that was a talking point that I thought was interesting. However, I tend to want to see how things play out because I know that when someone first files something, they're not gonna give you their whole strategic plan on how they're gonna prosecute. This is a summary. This is probably minimal detail compared to hopefully if they have a strong case, what they would bring in court when that day comes. So I'm curious to see how that plays out and what they end up discussing heavily, like what is their big point of proof. So the District of Columbia is going to have to provide discovery, which is going to be, they're saying like this is the proof that we plan to use in the proceedings, and so I'm curious to see what that would be.
Okay.
Now, just to provide context, I think this thing over here has got five counts. So there are 5 counts that he's
That's the one from the AG.
The AG. Okay. And I think we also need to clarify, because he had said it was a civil suit, but I think there are some people who think it's a criminal suit. But let me finish.
Yes.
So count 1, so there are 5 counts. So count 1 is minimum wage violations. The second count is overtime violations. The third count is violations of the Sick and Safe Leave Act, DC. The fourth one is employer records and notice violations, and the fifth count is violations of the wage payment and collection law.
Yeah.
So there are 5. So he's facing 5 counts.
So, but all those say violations there, right?
Yes.
However, the actual thing says theft.
Yes, it does say theft, but that is the wording that.
So the laws that have been referred to in those charges, and this was a 28
the minimum
page indictment.
wage.
So those laws are what, and I think it was a syntax thing or language thing, because what Kevin said was that DC changed the language of its laws from violations to theft. And not only did they change the language, but when I looked at the sentencing
Yes.
that's involved for the violations, it does involve jail time. So that makes it criminal.
Yeah.
You know, so I think his argument was DC was too harsh in changing this from what used to be violations to now
Theft.
what's criminal, calling it wage theft, because that's wording that was changed by the DC Council. So now that technically, because the DC Council already made that change, so that makes it a criminal violation. You know, and that's where, you know, like I know he said it's a civil, but again,
So when
this
did that change? When did that change?
no, I think some of these changes were made, you know, like it's been over time, 2013, 2014.
Okay.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
It's been a while.
So you can get jail time for a civil case. An example that most people are probably more familiar with is child support, which is a civil, like family court is civil. It's not a criminal court
Okay.
case proceeding that goes
Yeah.
on. It's a civil case, right? And if there is violations within that agreement that is then produced by the end of that, then you can get jail time for not agreeing to. So it is a civil case, and you can have jail time with a civil case.
But now the interesting language in which he used when he was here is that this is a civil case. I will not go to jail. So that's the language that he used.
And you know, when you look at, and yes, he did.
Yeah.
And when you look at, we were looking at it to see, well, is this civil or is this criminal?
Yeah.
It said that as long as the attorney general was filing it, they consider it criminal. However, there's also language in there that says that depending on the severity of it, it
Could
can
be
be
a
civil.
Okay.
So where does this fall?
So it's
you know,
So
it's
that-
it's
that
very
would be
much
it's one of those things where
Yes.
we can't
It's very
determine.
murky. You
Yes.
can't.
It's one of those that
And
we
if
can't
they have
determine.
been advised as
Yeah.
such that this is civil,
Yes.
and which means hopefully the goal here is really
To resolve.
to resolve.
Yeah.
You want to settle or not? I'm saying settle, but you need the violation.
Resolved.
You need resolution.
Yes.
And the people who are aggrieved, which is the workers, they need to be given restitution.
And we could debate, but the guy who himself is facing the axe, for lack of a better word, he comes out and says it's civil. I'll go with what he says.
Yeah.
They-
so
there's-
so
I
we
will
have to
I will
yeah.
go with what he says.
There's no axe.
Yeah.
Yes, the axe in this case would be garnishment or a fine he has to pay,
It's
Or the
done.
violation.
or the violation.
Yeah.
So I would go with that. But I think more to that was the conversation that was happening. You know, that Annette also mentioned was, and they were happening. You know what was happening off after the show ended, and I'm like, you know, that is it true? Is it true? I'm like, we will not know until when all is settled,
Yeah.
and if part of the agreement is not to divulge what has been
You know,
what
like-
has been sorted out.
Yeah.
Like if you know what, you know how like the Sekla family, those guys of
Yeah.
Matembe,
Yeah.
they said we'll pay the
we're
fine, but
settling, but we're not
we're-
gonna
we're
make
going to
this,
bring-
it's gonna remain sealed.
it's going to remain sealed.
Yeah.
We won't find out.
Yeah.
But I think, and I've been adamant about this, that if somebody was aggrieved and felt aggrieved, and with the opportunity to supposedly, for lack of a better word, face the guy that whatever, this might have been the opportunity to call in and not vent, but state your case. Like in terms of, I used to work for Swahili. From
My name is Kizito.
Wasabanga,
Yes.
or whatever.
Kukungwendu.
Oshio.
Yeah.
I used to work from this time to this time, and for the whatever I would work, I would have problems. either getting my paycheck, getting overtime, or this, or whatever it was.
But Uno, I can empathize.
That way,
I can empathize with that aggrieved person not wanting to come to a public platform. I personally can empathize with that, because even if they're no longer working for Swahili Village, I can empathize with them not wanting to come on a
and this
on a
is
public
but
platform.
the persons who would call you, mostly those people who would vent,
so
who would
the
call you to
people
vent.
who are venting, who are calling me, yes,
Those are the people. Like,
so I
but
can tell you, I've had, and even Omosh can tell you, we've even had, some employees tell us while we were there that this is the situation. We're not going to pretend that has not happened.
True.
But then I'm saying the people who are calling me, these are not former Swahili Village employees. It's just other people
Public.
Yeah, it's just the public. Yeah, who are calling, and some were trying to feed me what to say, and I'm like, I cannot say something that's not factual. If you have something to say that
Call
he
and
told
say,
you,
yes.
I'll give you an example of a common thread that I've been getting from a couple of people, and they wanted me to come and say it, and of course I'm saying it now. So there's one thread where a lot of people were saying that Kevin has told them that he doesn't care about the Kenyan customer base because they're a very small percentage. However, Kevin came here on the show and said quite the opposite.
Yes.
So my thing is that when you come and tell me that he told you this in a private conversation, when we're in a setting like this where we are accountable and facts are being interrogated, we can't come and say stuff like, oh, I had someone say, or someone so and so said, that's just something that's not gonna fly here. You're gonna be the first people to call me out that I'm saying something based on speculation or based on what someone has told me.
Yes.
And that's a challenge, and that's the reason why I want even the people who are listening now to comment and just tell us how they thought, or maybe you can also tell us where you think we might have fallen short, or maybe what we should have done extra that we did not do. But I can always tell you these things whenever you're having a live conversation. It's sometimes very easy to look from the outside and say, oh, this is what, like today, someone, there was a group that I'm with one mic with, someone said that you guys should have had a live fact checker. But now
what do they mean by a live fact checker? Like somebody sitting at the AG's office
a live
to check
fact,
stuff?
a live fact checker when when let's say the guest is talking,
Correct.
Someone is checking to see whether what he's saying is correct. And these big media houses, they do have that. But then
in
but
his
then when
case,
you
how do we interrogate what
then
he's
This
saying?
particular.
But then when you pose the question, was there a fact that we missed? Whenever you ask that question to
Yes.
whoever is bringing that,
Yes.
they don't have an answer to give you.
Okay, so in the case where some, like the example you gave where you said that the Kenyans are not, like he doesn't give a flying flip about Kenyans, and he's come out and said publicly that Kenyans are his number one supporters,
Yes.
blah, 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 blah. How do you then come back to do a fact check on that?
So that's where I'm saying,
Right.
you can't do a fact check
We
on
are,
private
we are
conversations.
basically, it's from quote unquote the horse's mouth, unless there's something that he's saying negative, or in fact, unless he's saying it's a lie that the AG did not charge me with that, and we can see it right there that it says that charge number 4 says X.
I think some of the issue, because the good thing about the show is that we were getting attacks from both sides. Some of the people who are on Kevin's side were saying that we were a bit too hard on him, and some of the people on this other side who are on the aggrieved
too lenient
side felt that we're being too lenient. In fact, someone used the word massage. Say that you guys were massaging.
No, they was
So
we were told we really got up in his scrotum.
So people were coming in from.
Hola.
Well,
so
that's how
people,
they said it.
Yeah, so people were coming in from both
sides of that.
Of the spectrum. And then of course, to me, I'll honestly say the part that also frustrated me a little bit was the part where the response is online, you can go reference it. So that part, it was a bit frustrating. But then again, like his comeback was, like this is a case that's going on, and we are not allowed to discuss it. So we were not in the private session. We're not in those privileged sessions. So he's the one who knows that.
And to add on to that, I think even going in, one of the things that when he walked in and he saw this, he's like, by the way, that one, I can't touch that. Mm-hmm. That's what he said.
Yeah, that's what he said.
Right? And I was like, okay, it's fair enough. And we told him, like, okay, we are going to ask the questions. Then you can navigate as you see fit. Because also, we don't want him to anika himself or open himself up, because it's a matter that's being litigated.
Yeah.
And I don't think anyone would want, even themselves, even if they're going, if they have to go to court. And like Annette said, by the way, it was the consensus of many, and one of them being a person who runs a business, that if it was him, he would not have
been on the show.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
At all.
But
I think I also considered,
yeah.
I'm thinking, what it's I think for me it's like akin to you being a defense lawyer and your client wants to take the stand. Okay. And in front of a jury.
Yeah.
And maybe they'll hit a home run or they will strike out.
Yeah.
And I think with this one, I guess with this also being, according to him, a civil case, it would not hurt to, because there's also the Swahili Village brand, and there's also that not wanting that stink to linger, and so there has to be a way to, you probably are going to stop the bleeding, maybe you put a band, but you address, what's in front of you right now. We may not have, he may not have addressed all the questions. By him answering, we've already answered, and it's you can find it online. But even that one of navigating and understanding, like how tipping works, like in the restaurant industry, what's going on.
As well as how it works at Swahili Village.
At Swahili Village, the 20% minimum mandatory, whatever he does, the gratuity, and how...
Automatic gratuity.
And automatic gratuity. Understanding how... you can't take the order, you can't go get the order yourself, you can't clear the table, whatever, and especially if it's busy, understanding that it takes a team.
Yeah, there's a line of people.
There's a line of people.
Yes.
I think that one also, like, okay, you also now appreciate like what happens. But
so I think usually when in a situation like this, someone will have their lawyer or a representative come and speak on their behalf. And so that's part of the surprise of him coming on the show, because that person can then now, like, if you wanna shift the conversation away from the business or from him as an individual, then there are strategies that you use. You can, poke holes in the statements that are being made. You can even make some factual statements, such as, we had never gotten warnings before, or like, I don't know how many times they'd been contacted prior to this, or if they went straight to this case.
We did interrogate.
So the interesting revelation that actually, which is one of the good things of having such conversations, is the media story, the tweet, the AG's office publishing this was on August 23rd. But now he told us that they had already received a subpoena of over a year before that August 23rd. So this was something that was ongoing. And he also said, because I went back and re-listened to the show, he said again that there was an attempt to reach a settlement, but it did not go very well, on his own words on the show. And I believe that's a reason why the Attorney General went and tweeted it out, and it got to all the media. Yeah,
so then that lawyer or PR person would qualify those conversations, because as a general statement, I don't quite personally know what that means based off of the statements that he made. But if you can make a statement saying, we were given this official type of communication and contact, and so this was the proceedings that we were doing, and you could even try and defend by saying, because we were in conversations, this came as a surprise, or this was there's just a way that PR people or a lawyer would be able to kind of give facts and information that would kind of shift the attention away from the business and kind of the strategy that's being used to attack them. mind you, that doesn't take away from the claim or the case. The case is that there has been wage theft. And that word, I understand that there is some discussion about violation and theft, but I just was thinking about the term stealing time. You know, when you clock in and you're not doing any work, like that's called stealing time. It's not. There's no other kind word that they don't say it's a clock in violation. It's a type of theft. So I think that language is a bit
Maryland doesn't
consistent.
use that language though.
Well, that is, I think when it comes to the common conversation, like that language is used
in public opinion.
So
in
like,
public opinion,
we're not talking
theft is more harsh than
Right.
violation.
And yes, and again, at the end of the day, it's really all perception, which is back to, you know, with him coming on the show by himself versus having an agent or someone else come to represent Swahili Village. It would not, to be honest, if they had told us that a rep would come in lieu of him, we wouldn't have taken the interview. We would have said, no, we don't want it.
Now,
Because for us, we don't want it coming secondhand. A lot of things that we do, we will do direct with the party.
and then you see we had a lot of people. Another thing that especially the newer fans don't know is that we have interviewed Kevin before. This wasn't the first time he was coming to the show. He was actually due to come for another interview even before this thing went public. We had just not
Scheduled.
we had just not
Yes.
properly scheduled it.
Yeah.
He was actually due to come for another interview. So having interviewed him, you know, like in the happy times where there are some people who discovered Swahili Village through,
This
through
platform.
us.
Yeah.
So now here he is. He's being accused of wage theft. You guys interviewed him. You guys introduced us to him. So what are you guys doing about it? Because we're also getting comments like you guys haven't talked about this story. You know, because from when it went
down,
live, we did not touch it. You know, like until
we didn't mention
were
it,
able
we
to
didn't
get-
say anything.
Yeah, we didn't say anything.
So assumption is that you guys are hiding it.
Yeah, you guys are hiding it. You don't want to talk
Yeah.
about it. But then when we brought him, then of course you have people, you know, like feeling that, oh, he did not say what I wanted to hear. Now, a couple of comments here coming.
Yeah, read those comments.
Washek and Dirang was saying, to respond to the one Mike show, it's not easy for the victims to come out because we Kenyans have a history of lynching and re-victimizing. And then Awar is asking, so what was Kevin's take on being on the show? We haven't actually talked to him about this. He was on his way to Kenya, actually. He went to Kenya the following day. So this is something that we can talk about him. But Awar, we want to know, what was your take on
As a
Kevin
listener,
being,
yeah.
as a listener on Kevin
Yeah.
being on the show? And the reason why I asked this is I kind of feel, when there was so much chatter that was happening. So to me, the reason why I had that expectation that people are gonna come and flood the zone is because of all that chatter that was happening. But then I also came to realize, the kind of operation that we have here, we take facts very seriously.
Yeah.
We interrogate facts, and there's accountability. So I think in spaces where there's record and accountability, I think people are more scared to say something that they would normally say on banter on WhatsApp.
Right.
Like those comments that we're getting in WhatsApp groups.
Yeah.
It's very rare for someone to come here and say that because there's a record here. And I think, I don't know whether it's mentally, or maybe I don't know whether it's the way we conduct the show, in that we are only going to interrogate the facts that we have. And if the guest has, some privileged information that we don't have, we would be happy to hear that from him.
Right.
So I think in that environment, I think that's what maybe made some people a bit scared of coming, because, if you talk about nilisikia or niliambiwa, we're going to ask you, to show us proof. Not even who,
Yeah.
is there any proof of this? Because we can't just go by he, she said.
Yeah.
Another comment that's coming from Washeke is that he was successful in humanizing himself, but at times I felt he was dismissive. Just because you run a business and provide opportunities to Kenyans doesn't mean we can't keep you accountable. I agree with you on that, Washeke.
Agreed.
But opportunities should not be only Kenyans. It's opportunities to all.
Opportunities to all, yeah.
And I think that's sometimes also something we tend to assume because it's a Kenyan who's running a business that then they will in turn have to engage with Kenyans.
Okay, another comment coming from Washeke is, I also disagreed with his views of tipping, that the servers are there to benefit us patrons, not his business. The one part that I totally disagreed with him is where if he says if the customer feels that they were not treated right by the server, that he would take the tip away from the server and give it back to the customer. That's something that for me personally, you know, and maybe that's how it's done in restaurants, but for me personally, I disagree with that, because I don't know how I would feel if my pay at work was docked for a day because I was slacking, you know, like on that particular day. And it happens sometimes. When you're working, you're not going to be perfect, you know.
I agree with Kevo.
When you're working,
and I understand what you're saying about when you're working. I think there's a totally big difference between when somebody's serving you food and presenting it to you, because this is something you're putting into your stomach, right?
Yeah.
This ish can literally
but
kill
remember,
you.
just like
let me finish.
Yeah.
This stuff can actually take you out, or you can end up in a hospital, and it all starts and stops with the person who's presenting it to you. So if it's coming from an environment that is not clean, it's not handled correctly, there's all sorts of things that are happening, and this endpoint person is the one that's presenting it to you. If that stuff is not presented the right way, first of all, Ali, you and I, we've been in restaurants together.
I think sometimes, and here's the issue I have with this with tipped wage.
Okay.
Sometimes someone will refuse to tip because they feel like the smile wasn't right.
Okay.
And people will get
true.
mad.
That is
people
true.
will get mad at that.
That is very true.
Sometimes
That is very
customers
true.
get mad at things that are not necessarily in the control of the server. You know, like I feel like you are not smiling right.
Correct.
You know, like I feel like sometimes it has nothing to do with the cleanliness of the food.
And that's like
where,
you said, it's sometimes.
Yeah.
Ali, to be honest, the majority of folks who either don't tip or don't want to tip in a situation where they normally would tip, because there's those people who just don't tip.
Yeah.
Okay. But in a situation where they're not tipping, it's because something in the service was bad. It had nothing to do with the personality of the person. Personality helps, but if it's going to take you 30 minutes to bring me my food and you didn't give me like a preemptive strike, which is something that they were very guilty of in their prior years, like when they first started, they did not warn you ahead of time and tell you, okay, look, your food is being made to order. It's going to take X amount of time, but what you should do, or my advice to you as a person who's waiting on you, is order an appetizer, because that's going to keep you going, you know, and listen to the good music we have, blah, blah, blah. And before you know it, your food's going to be out. But it's going to take X amount of time because it's made to order. This food is not just sitting and you go to a hot dish and you pakua gali and you bring it. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, yeah. Let me go back to the comments again. Walter Pio says, I agree with Annette. It was a tough balancing act to appear on the show versus sending a legal representative. He did well, though. And then Awar says, guys, it's not harsh. Let's not ease the reality. Theft of service is real. Wage theft is real. The wage theft would yield a violation. Awar again says, but his staff is diverse and has been for a long time. And then Washeke also says, one thing we are all in agreement is the exploitative nature of the restaurant business in America. Patrons are forced to subsidize wages via tips, and the servers are paid peanuts because they will be given tips. Another part where I also philosophically disagreed with him.
You brought that up, yes.
Where I philosophically disagreed with him, although I will openly admit I've never run a restaurant, I've never owned a restaurant.
Have you ever worked in a tipped environment?
No, I've never worked in a tipped environment.
It does make a difference if you've worked in that, and that's like you hear people like Sheka talking that way. Those are people who've actually probably held a tray and they know.
But I think the problem, you know, because remember he said that this problem is not there in Europe, and Europe, the restaurants are still in business. So he said that if we get to start paying the servers, you know, like the standard minimum wage,
correct,
then it's going to be tough on the restaurants. He may be forced to shut down.
Yes.
Now, I remember I mentioned 6 American states that are already doing that, and District of Columbia is on its way to doing that.
Yeah, they are working on it, and he did also say that. He said that they are working on it.
And in these 6 states that are already implementing it, restaurants are still
in business.
They're still in business.
Yeah.
I think the problem, like just being in business, is that when there's no level playing field, let's say, like, for example, you decide that you're gonna pay your servers the standard minimum wage, and the guys, your competition next door, is not doing that. They have an advantage over you in that they can charge lower prices because they're paying less. But when the field is put level, then now all of you have to pay a standard minimum wage. I think now that makes it easier, because you're not gonna your next door neighbor is not gonna have a competitive edge, because they're also paying that standard minimum wage, which I think should be the standard. I honestly think minimum. I think tips should be extra beyond the standard minimum wage.
I agree with you, Ali. And I used to work in fast food.
Yeah.
And the difference between fast food and tipped is fast food, you're paid whatever the minimum state wage is, and then also requisite to your position, right?
Yeah.
So hypothetically, if you're in Wendy's, Roy Rogers, whatever, McDonald's, whatever, you get X, right? Or Chick-fil-A, right? But when you come to now a tipped environment, they say, partner, because you're going to get tips, the tips are going to bump you to what the state minimum wage is.
Yeah.
So the assumption is that in that hour, if we're going to give you $3.75 as a tipped employee, then you should be able to make the difference to get to, say, $13.75 of $10 in that hour based off of the tables you have in front of you.
Yeah.
So if in the first hour you have nothing and in the second hour you have something, but those guys tip you 20, you're still okay. You get what I'm saying? Because you still got to that you still got to the $13.75 per hour. But it's not necessarily always the case. And so why did they feel, whoever put these into law, because it was across America all along, until states started realizing that, this is either not fair, or it's not working, or it's just not something that's conducive. Why didn't they just say, so minimum wage is minimum wage, pay it?
So if you look at the background of tipping,
interesting
it's very sad. And maybe, Annette, you're also familiar with the history. So tipping started in places where actually the employers did not want to pay, the people who are coming to work. So they're like, okay, you can come and work, but your payment is going to be whatever you're going to get. Because remember, even minimum wage is not something that was there in American law. It was introduced, I believe, in the 30s. Before, it was whatever we agree, whatever I'm going to pay you. So tipped minimum wage also came into being to protect those people who are being exploited, because of just being told, you come and your payment is going to be whatever
you get, yes, whatever people will give you, yes.
So that tip minimum wage was a bump up to protect them. And now you have states like California, Nevada, and a couple of other states. There's like 6 states that have that have eliminated tipped minimum wage, which I think all states should.
They should do. They should do it, and you chalk it up to experience. Maybe the state themselves will reduce some taxes somewhere that will offset for the owners of the businesses. Yeah, and
Awar is asking, what is the standard of a fine dining establishment? I don't think there's a standard. I think the standard is the.
What does she mean by standard?
I think the wage standard. I think it's a minimum tip.
No, it's
by the state.
It's tipped.
It's whatever the state says.
Yes, but it's by the state. But then most of them are still on tipped. So that's why I'm saying it's tipped, because again, you said it's 6 states.
Yeah. So 6 states are doing it, and restaurants are still in existence.
Yeah, so it's tipped.
With fine dining, they always have larger or consistent mandatory gratuities, which
correct, and that's where that whole automatic thing kicks in, where either they'll say it's automatically will it be 20%, or it'll be based upon the number of people in your party.
But you see, the funny thing, like when I go to Ruth and Chris, I don't see that automatic.
It's there.
It's there.
Just check it. It's there.
I don't know.
It's there.
I mean, if you're spending at Ruth Chris, spending is not an issue.
Chris, definitely,
it's not an issue. Spending is not an issue.
Definitely many of the restaurants in Baltimore City, like in Harbor East, they do have that
automatic 20%.
Or if you're, you know,
If you're a party of like
these
6,
places
if you're more than 6 or so.
that are smaller, that are not, you know, big franchises, they'll have that as well. Some of these restaurants that you see, they get big on TikTok or they get big on Instagram, and they even have, you know, you have to call in advance and secure your card online for your reservation, things like that. So, you know, there are different ways of going about it. But I'm interested to see how tipping culture has continued in those states that do have that minimum wage standard. If tipping culture has, because sometimes it's a cultural thing too. So there's some people who will tip regardless of the service because there's an understanding that's
where they're making their money.
Right. That's key to this person.
Which is what Ali was saying.
However, you know, they're not going to do the above and beyond. So I've heard, you know, I have a $5 minimum, as long as that $5 is not like extremely below, you know, what would be a standard gratuity percentage, right? Yeah. So let's say you have a minimum, but you're not going to give them the $10 or what you would give more generously if you felt that the service was better. You
know, and that's where, you know, like I sometimes refrain because it was also happening, you know, like where he said that in our culture, people don't tip.
Yes.
I think, you know, like there's a tendency sometimes black people like repeating that narrative that black people don't tip, and the truth is the people who don't tip are people who come from cultures that don't tip. For example, Europeans, but you're never gonna hear people saying that white Europeans don't tip because they also don't, because they come from a culture where tipping is not necessarily a thing, because the restaurant workers there are paid, you know, like above minimum wage.
And when you come, and it also depends too, like you're saying, in the environment. So when I know I've had the experience where we're here, we do tips, and that's just standard. If someone helps you out, you'll give them a couple dollars, even if it's not necessarily the restaurant experience. Now, when you go to Kenya, you're told emphatically,
do not tip.
Do not tip.
Yeah, because they're on salary.
Yes, but then also it also makes you a target. There's some other nuanced things too.
The other part that they tell us, other than the target, is that because we tend to do tipping based upon percentage of the bill, right? And if you do it based upon the percentage of the bill, and you sat down and say your bill is 5,000 shillings,
and
right?
then you're paying 1,000 in tips.
So then now we'll do, you know, the 20%, right? And so we may end up giving, you know, $500, or well, maybe we'll give 1,000 shillings, right? But this person is making $20K for the month. So if you come there
maybe 13.
Okay, $13K, fine.
20K is too much.
Okay, fine, $13K. So if you come there twice with the same, you're pretty much giving this person 2,000 shillings. You come there 3 times, 3,000 shillings. So if you come there during the duration when you're in Kenya, you may end up paying this person's salary in tips. But what you're also setting up a precedent for them, the locals, is that they're now being left with this culture that we have created for the brief time we're there. If they're the ones that slap our hands, right? When we're sitting with our, you know, our folks, we've got to visit. They're like, "What are you doing?" In fact, they'll even take the money off the table. They'll take it off the table and put it in their pocket. Not like they'll give it back to you. And they're like, "What are you doing? You're messing it up for us."
But let me tell you something. Let me tell you something about the tipping culture as we wrap up. There's a very interesting thing that I've seen, because I, you know, like on my spare time, I do rideshare. I do Uber. Let me tell you something. The best part about the tipping on apps like Uber and Lyft, because you can see who tipped and you can see who didn't. And the narrative that typically comes with those who normally tip and those who don't, it shows you a totally different thing. So a lot of times in America, people are going to tip because they understand it's not out of their kindness. It's because they understand that this is the culture, this is what's paying them. So they're doing it out of obligation. But when you give people a choice, like how with rideshare, it's totally a choice. You know,
Correct.
like you don't have to tip. You know, like whatever rideshare drivers make, it's you know like it's way beyond minimum wage. So those tips are just extras. So that's where you can make a determination of who tips and who doesn't. And it's gonna surprise you. And that's why the reason, you know, like these narratives like, oh, black people don't like tipping. I'm like, you know,
I think
like
it's
be careful.
African people in my
Or even African
it's
people.
Africans in my opinion.
I
I,
will
don't
say
think it's
Africans.
black. I think it's Africans.
I will say
Black
Africans.
people
In fact, I'll
tip.
say Kenyans.
Black people tip.
That's right,
I'm
that's
telling you,
it.
when I tell you black people, I mean like black Americans tip, and Annette will tell you
I
her
think-
colleagues,
I
they
think,
tip.
I think when you say Africans, you should also add /Europeans, because Europeans.
I can't talk for Europeans. I can only talk for
I can-
Africans,
I-
and I've
I-
never
I-
spent any time in Europe,
I
so
can
I
talk,
don't know.
I can talk for them. I can talk for
Okay.
Europeans also don't do it, but you're never gonna hear it being verbalized like the way people are so happy to verbalize that Africans don't tip. But Europeans are also the same, and it's because they come from a non-tipping culture. So the same way, you know, like Africans don't tip is the same way Europeans don't tip, but you're never gonna hear that happiness.
Yeah.
You know, like when people are saying that Europeans don't tip, but there's a certain happiness that you even saw with Omosh here. You know, like when saying, I can tell you Africans
Because
don't
I
tip."
know.
Yeah.
I can only speak on
Yes.
whether you want to call it happiness.
Yes.
I know what I'm speaking of because I was that person before I came to America.
Yes, and it's all non-tipping cultures. It's not just Africans. It's Europeans. It's Asians. It's all these other places where tipping is not. Tipping is, and like Awar says here, tipping is a legacy of slavery. It's an American thing. It's a very American thing. And even, you know, like tour operators back home, they love American tourists because they know that, you know,
They'll
like,
make extra.
Yeah, they'll make extra because American tourists, you know, tend to tip more. Awar says in 1938, when Franklin Roosevelt signed the nation's first minimum wage into law, it excluded restaurant workers, a category that included a disproportionate number of black people. And with that said, this is it for tonight. Annette, thank you so much for your time. Thanks to the amazing audience, and to the new ones, you know, please just follow us on all our social media handles. And for YouTube, we're going to be going off. Mimi ni wenyu Ali Badawi, aka Mjukuu wa Masai. Uno Mike, on to you.
Wahenga ulenena kilicho na mwanzo hakina budi kwa na mwisho. Meli imetia nanga. We are about to wrap this puppy up. I think Mika already dropped off. So finance Omosh there.
Thank you to our audience, to our esteemed guest, or is she a guestess? No, she's a hostess. No, she's a host. She's Annette. Thank you, Annette, for coming through. As usual, wisdom with fire, politics. Congratulations, Democrats. Hey, now I see how I'm going to engage inside DNC. I'm seeing the vision. I'm seeing things happening. And to all my fans who follow me, uko kwa mtandao, guess what? Tomorrow, Ali, I think you forgot. You guys totally forgot. Guess what? We have a walk for Africans for mental health.
Absolutely, yes.
And I'm a team captain. I'm going to be walking like it's 1969, Huko. It's at the mall. It's at the mall tomorrow. Starts, we report at about 3 o'clock. Yeah, 3 o'clock. We report at about 3 o'clock. I think the walk's going to be at about 5. So we report at 3 o'clock. It's a short walk. It's not a long walk. But we're going to be raising money for Africans for mental health. So check out my pages, and you shall definitely see all the information on that. I'm going to put it on my Insta, on my Facebook, all that good stuff, those who have not seen it. And so Africans for Mental Health, we're going to be having a walk tomorrow and raising money, and it's for awareness for suicide prevention. With that, see you guys next week. Peace.
All right. Annette, your last words?
Thank you guys so much for having me. I appreciate the robust conversation. I look forward to coming back and giving some more political and cultural perspective. I just want to remind everyone and invite everyone to come to Alimu Community Center on October 28th for our launch and fundraiser. That's 9600 Pulaski Park Drive in Middle River, Maryland, 21220, suite number 115.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, when you said 9600, I thought it was 9,600 per plate. I was like, I don't know whether we are gonna be coming there.
Ruth
But
Chris.
yes, but and Ruth Chris is not 9,600.
No.
Yeah, especially with the coupons and some other, like discounts that you can get. Yeah, there's ways of having a meal at 39.99 at Ruth Chris, but see me on the side if you wanna know how. But I wanna thank you, Annette, again for coming through. We always get very interesting perspectives from you. Hopefully, the world is gonna get peaceful. And the next conversation, we're gonna be talking about peacetime conversations and not wartime conversations like we are right now. And hopefully, things are gonna get much better. As we approach the elections, of course, people are going to need education. There were some interesting questions that came in, like, where do you find information about zoning? It's a very simple question, but one thing that I don't like is the difficulty in accessing such information. Even when you go to the website, you really have to dig sometimes to get what specifically you're looking for. Even if it's information about how to register a business, sometimes these public offices do not have the best of websites around. But thank you so much, and I also want to thank our listeners, those who tuned in. Thank you so much. We're gonna also be having another interesting guest next week. We're gonna let you know who it is. Na kwa hayo machache yote, ambaye anataka kunipigia simu, nambari yangu bado ni ile ile 1-800 mteule, na operator akishika simu mwambie unataka kusema na mjukuu, na akikuuliza ni mjukuu yupi, mkumbushe ni mjukuu yule yule wa Masai, because I'm Kenyan by blood, American by design, Masai by choice. Sichagui, sikagui na sibagui. Kwaherini.
Aiden, Daddy loves you. Jerry, Daddy loves you. Nimo, Daddy loves you. Until next week, be blessed.
Feeling how I